ignored your desires. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. I think somebody's just trying to thin out the competition, right? So that's not what's happened. In fact, we haven't even put the request for proposals together yet, and we're going to get started down that road today. So with that, I'd just like to welcome you all. We have an agenda out. I hope you all have the copy of the agenda. We're going to move through that agenda. There will be several opportunities for public comment after each of those topic areas. We encourage the public comment to really stay focused to the agenda item. It would be premature at this point to hear, elaborate proposals from, a community about this is why we should have the complex in our city. Be premature at this point. So keep your comments focused on the topics that we're discussing, and I think we'll move through the agenda smoothly. Mr. Co-Chairman, any comments?
Mr. Co-Chair, roll call.
For the State Shooting Complex Oversight Task Force, September 27th, Senator Cole.
Present.
Representative Ottman.
Present.
Josh Corsi.
Present.
Aaron Davidson.
Present.
He's online.
Excused.
He's on Zoom.
Nope, he's
Oh, he's
on.
on Zoom. There he is.
There he is.
All right.
Wyoming Business Council.
For Josh Durrell, Brandon Marshall.
Dave Glenn.
Present.
Judy Ligursky.
Excused.
Kate Mestas. Nish Goyalake. Goy. Kolia.
Present.
Thank you. James Schoon.
Present.
Co-Chairman Hicks.
Here.
Co-Chairman Washit.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. So I think with that, Mr. Co-Chair, what we'd like to do is just dive into this agenda a little bit. We're going to go through some survey results. We talked about this last time and said, well, let's just put a survey out there. Typical fashion, we usually don't get a lot of participation in these. And quite frankly, I was shocked that we'll go through this, just the number to reflect Co-Chair. There's people all over the Wyoming, but we got people all over the country from Florida to Texas that are paying attention to what's going on with this thing here in Wyoming. So there's a lot of interest, not only in the state, but around the nation to try to bring in a world-class type shooting facility, complex, outdoor education. Just one comment that I've experienced since we started this is the grasping of the complex and what we're talking about. So there's been a lot of interest of, we've all got good shooting ranges in our local communities. And this is not what this task force is designed to do. We're literally looking at something that's world class. When we looked at one of the facilities to a state down just to the south of us, at one event, they had 23 different states and people from 6 different countries participating in a weekend event down there. That's the type of facility that we're looking at. And so as we get into the agenda today, that we're going to lay out some of just the basic framework as what it will take to put that kind of facility together. But I guess the message I want to leave with you, think big, world class. This is just not our typical, county or municipal shooting range and stuff. It's really supposed to be something special. And look forward to working with the audience and the task force as we continue to put this together. We have great plans that eventually this will turn into a business park and attract more manufacturing industry associated with this. And so this is just the start of a long process. I anticipate that this is going to take actually a build out over a number of years to get all this pulled together, but we want to create something that literally is a destination for people around the country to come to wherever this is. And to reiterate Co-Chair's comments, this was designed to set up through a multi-stage process. So what we're going to work on today is what we will call a pre-application or a pre-proposal. There'll be multiple opportunities as we move forward for communities to participate. So there'll be probably 2 or 3 times that we're going to start putting the meats on the bones of the pre-proposal today. That'll go out. We'll have 60 to 90 days to be able to work on that. Everybody will have an opportunity to then come back with another application to answer additional questions, what resources and type are available. And we'll probably go through a third process on that. And then we'll start working on design phase and some of those. The way this is going to work is when this task force gets through this with all these applications and processes, our role is going to be to make a recommendation to the Wyoming legislature and the governor as to where to locate this. It will not be the ultimate decision of this group. It'll be a decision of the legislature with input from the governor's office. Ours is to screen it down and make a final recommendation back as to where that should be located. So the reason I want to walk through that process is we anticipate this is probably going to take 1.5 years. So we'll get through the rest of this year. So probably in the 20, so that we'll be going into session in the legislature 2024, 2025 is when we probably attend. This is the target date that we will make a recommendation to the legislature as to where this facility will be located within the state of Wyoming. And then it's up to the legislature to go ahead and authorize that project to move forward. So just as we move forward, that's kind of a time frame of what we're looking at, the decision points. There'll be multiple opportunities for people to be engaged with the task force as we develop these plans, designs, concepts, and facilities to actually move forward with something that's concrete. So with that, Mr. Co-Chair, I turn the meeting back over to you and we can jump in there.
Thank you. Karen, let's move to the survey. Just kind of walk us through the summary on the survey, what we learned from that survey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karen Vaughn, LSO. The survey went out on our website and a gov delivery was done on August 3rd. It stayed open for 6 weeks. It asked for participants' name, where they were located, contact information, as well as gave them an opportunity to provide 10 areas in shooting sports that they felt were very important to have at this facility, as well as 10 non-shooting amenities that they thought, and then an opportunity for additional comment. You're absolutely right. I did not expect to get 370 responses. I thought I would be able to jump into this a couple days ahead of time and have the bulk of it done and kind of pre-plan this. But the responses were very robust and provided a lot of insight. Because we left the answers open-ended, we got a lot of responses that I could not quantify in order of precedence. So for example, not everyone said 22 long rifle or 3 gun or 5 stand. They were a lot of times describing the same disciplines, but using different words. So it became, I thought, not appropriate for me to decipher exactly what they meant to say. So rather than doing it in an order of precedence and saying, okay, 200 people thought this was the number 1 thing and 100 people thought this should be the number 2, I went with a keyword approach so that we could look at all 10 items and say what had the most frequency. In that regard, if you'll look at page 3, those summary of keywords I've pulled out. And so you'll see where the shooting sports are listed on the right-hand side. And then above that, you'll see where the generic terms were listed. So rifle was listed almost 300 times. Trap 190, pistol 270. Because in many regards, they did not specify a specific sport. They just said pistol or handgun. And so I wanted to make sure that we captured those results, even though they didn't list a specific sport. Might also be interesting to note of who responded in those 370. 8 of Wyoming's counties represented about 75%. But not all 8 of those counties were geographically, I would say, in the same area. As I've got on the bottom of page 1, not only did we have Fremont and Sweetwater County, but we have Laramie, Campbell County, Natrona County, Park, Sheridan, and Hot Springs. So if you notice, we have wide support all across the state in this survey. I classified participants in the survey based upon some of the background information that they provided. Now, it might be an argumentative to say that all hunters are recreational, but for consistency, that's where I place anyone that indicated that they hunted for non-sport, non-competitive sport. And so that's probably why it is ranked so heavily. But we do have lots of sporting hunters, if that makes sense. And so you might want to consider that when you're looking at that number. Competitive sports, you'll see, did rank fairly high. And many of these participants not only ranked in one of these categories, but they ranked on average in 3 or 4. And I've got an example of someone who is involved in the industry, who serves as a range officer, who might serve with their 4-H club, who might do some competitive shooting, might have had a background in law enforcement or in the military, and hunts in the fall. While that person hits all 5. And I wanted to make sure that we recognize that they hit all 5 areas in their background, because each one of those does have a unique perspective. Going back to the keywords, the other thing I'd like to mention are the items that people mentioned that were not specifically shooting sports. And I got those answers also. I should also say, I got shooting answers in the non-shooting amenities, and I got non-shooting answers in the shooting amenities. So I used both of those when I did the keyword search, just to make sure that we captured both, just in case someone was not quite clear on what they should be placing. And certain things did strike a chord. You'd see repeating over and over, regardless of how they mention. Food and beverage service in some capacity was very important. While some were satisfied with a vending type situation, it went all the way up to having a restaurant and cafeteria on site. There was requests for a bar or a shooter's lounge, somewhere to relax after the day. And so you went literally from vending machines to a shooting lounge. I tried to capture all of those within some sort of food and beverage service, because that's what they were trying to get to. Similar with facilities. You had some that were very interested in basic primitive facilities, all the way up to very modern facilities, to include the ability to have a locker room type situation where you could shower off at the end of the day. So I tried to capture those as well. Lodging, of course, you'll see had 8 or 9 different ways it was described. But overall, lodging, facilities, those types of things were what was important. The last thing I'd mention is the issue of location. Everyone seemed to have a preferred location, and it generally corresponded to where they were coming from, as could be expected. There were some areas that they recommended you not have it. Again, because they preferred their geography and topography better, I believe. But it goes without saying that a lot of them wanted to have not only the best facilities on site, but wanted to have proximity to additional facilities off site. It was not uncommon for them to mention restaurants, hotels, shopping, retail, things like that for non-shooting members in their party. And so having access to those types of things, having airport access, having large airport access, good roads, paved roads, those types of things were also important that we found in this survey. I will note that we did not, the reason why I went with making this memorandum available without the survey attached, I want to address that, is because I don't know that the respondents realized that their comments may become public. And a lot of them did put personal and private information, their telephone numbers. And I didn't think it appropriate to go ahead and put that out there for general consumption. I don't want to invite that type of behavior. So for the most part, if Mr. Chairman, if you want us to release the survey, I can redact those items and make those other comments available. But I don't think you'll really find anything in those comments that you won't also find in the memorandum.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the keyword approach that you took to the data. I think it gives us a very useful summary of the information. Committee, any questions for Karen on the survey?
Yeah, Mr.
Are there copies of these available for the public in the room?
I brought with me 5 copies.
Okay,
And I can make additional copies. The committee each received it electronically, I believe on Monday.
Okay.
But I can also make additional print copies available if you'd like.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Please.
Karen, I'm curious if you could explain the distribution of the survey from LSO. I know our organization had sent that out 5 times requesting the public to participate, but I'm curious what other processes to distribute that were.
We did not continuously provide gov deliveries. That is our main form of distribution to those who are on our mailing list. But it was on a splash page on our website. So if you went into the Wild Lake site, you would immediately find a link to be able to submit your comments.
Okay, were there other, Nish, do you know if Game and Fish solicited feedback from the public on this at all?
Mr. Chair, Josh, we did not. And
Okay.
so we would have distributed that a little further, I think.
Right. Thank you, Karen.
Further questions?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that just highlights if it was, Muley Fanatics had put information, but other than the LSO website, it just wasn't widely distributed, which gets back to some of my earlier comments. There's a lot of people that are paying attention and tracking. So Karen, I know you captured that we had 9 counties, but so I went through here. So we had respondents from 61 different cities within the state of Wyoming. And then on the data that you guys don't have, but I'm just going to share some of that with you. Outside of Wyoming, we had comments from Florida, Nevada, North Dakota, Texas, and Utah about what kind of, facility that we should look at, what kind of sports that we would want to have, competitive shooting sports and stuff like that. But given the fact that the short turnaround on this and it was just posted on the LSO's website to get over 300 respondents is pretty incredible. But so, Mr. Chairman, just because we don't have copies for everybody in the audience, I think maybe just to kind of give you guys a flavor of some of the responses we got. So looking at the keyword component on there, so lodging, what did people want as far as lodging? And so number 1 was RV camping spaces at the complex. And so number 2 was camping. Number 3 was hotel motels. And so when we looked at those top 3, there was a lot of interest in folks being able to pull in their RV, camper, whatever that is, plug in and have, I'm assuming, electrical and sewer and facilities there. But those are the 3 top respondents there. Other amenities included restaurants, food, clubhouse, and snacks that at this complex, that those would be available there. When we talked about location, number one was just ease of access. Number two was airport and then interstate highway. And so amenities as far as specific to shooting was a pro shop, rentals, ammo, gunsmith, supplies, and accessories. When we looked at the different sports, number one most commented on was rifle and then pistol, trap. Archery was number 4, skeet, clays, 1,000-yard range, 3-gun, 5-stand, 22, cowboy action sports, over 1,000-yard range, NRL, USPSA, steel challenge, and IDPA shooting sports. And I'm sure there's probably some that we haven't captured out there. Those are the ones that the respondents said. And then biographical characterization, who actually commented on it. The highest number of respondents were competitive shooters, made up about 88 comments on that, which the next one that was interesting to me was educators. And so they see the opportunity to do quite a bit of firearms training and education at this facility. Number 3 was industry. So, gun manufacturer, other outdoor accessory manufacturing type of industry stuff, the people. And then the number 1 was obviously recreational shooters. But that just kind of the questions and the responses that we got back, that gives you a little bit of flavor of some of the information that the respondents had provided. So any thoughts on that, Mr. Co-Chair, or members of the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Josh.
Yeah, Senator Hicks, I think the one thing that stands out under amenities, although it wasn't listed in order, but it certainly was the highest number at 195, was the prevalence that was given to an indoor facility. I think that was something that across the board seemed to be very well documented with the participants of this survey.
It's almost like we have bad weather part of the year around here or something.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot of surprises. The popularity of an indoor range just by sheer number was certainly stood out. But for the most part, I think these were things that the committee anticipated. And I didn't see any huge shocking revelations in the data. But I think one thing that stood out to me was the number of recreational shooters. And I think that's certainly going to be something that we look at as we go forward, that this facility, although, the hope is that we're going to be bringing in shooters from all over the country for matches, and shooters from other countries even to come in and shoot in matches and so forth. The facility is going to be open to the public. At least I anticipate that it would, and it would be the place where people in the vicinity could certainly come and enjoy a recreational opportunity. But also, if you're traveling about the state and want to go check out this fine new facility when it's constructed, to take the family out and do a little plinking at the Wyoming State Shooting Complex will certainly be available, and hopefully something that would be affordable to the recreational shooters as well as the competitive people. Be my only comment down here.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things I found interesting was the number of archery respondents. I know as a task force at the meeting we had at the Cameo overview, that plays a large role in their complex as well. But I think there's, with the way the place is named and kind of how we talk about shooting, I don't think archery has risen to the top, and yet we had almost 200 people respond that it was important to them. And so I think as we go, trying to make sure that those people know they're welcome at the table too, because I think it can play a major role in people coming here to do cool things at a great complex.
Absolutely, well stated. Other comments? Mr. Co-Chairman?
Yeah, specifically the RC issue. One of the things that we were hoping to do with the task force that we just didn't get done this year was actually to get out and look at one of these total archery challenges. They have them in the states surrounding us. And for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons was just the sheer number of participants that come from all over the country again. A little bit different clientele than some of the shooting sports. They tend to be younger. They tend to be more family oriented with a lot of the total archery challenge, but the amount of manufacturers that come to these things is impressive. And, outdoor recreation across the board. And so we'd still like to do that at some point in time, is to get folks out to one of those total archery challenges. But I think you make a really good point. And it's not a byproduct. Any of this facility that we put together is going to have a substantial archery component associated with it. So I just want to make that clear.
And Mr. Chairman, one of the events that I would recommend we take a look at, even if it's just via a video stream or something, would be there's the Western Classic Trail Shoot in Redding, California in May. It's the largest outdoor trail shoot, and it's more where the total archery challenges are all at ski resorts. These are walking courses, 72 different places with on-site campgrounds. We exhibit there every year along with about 80 other vendors. And they cap their registration at 2,100 people, and it's a race. The weekend they open it up to get everybody to fill it in. And there's competitors from at least 20 countries in almost every state there. So it'd be a good model to look at.
What was the name of that?
It's the Western Classic Trail Shoot,
And where's it at?
Redding, California.
Is it always there or do they move
It
it
is.
around?
No, it's hosted by their the Straight Arrow Bow Club there. So it's there.
So they haven't put a quiver ban on California on archery equipment yet. have
This
they?
is the state of Jefferson. It's Northern California. They're a little different up there.
That was one thing I did notice when we visited Cameo was that their 3D archery loops were fairly modest. Yeah, and that if there's an area that our shooting complex could really stand out apart from Cameo, it might be in that archery arena. Anybody else? Yes, Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment about the survey. I thought it was very well given many comments and but about the survey, I just want to tell everybody that, I don't much care if we got 1,000 folks going out there and saying, right in, let's get an archery facility or let's do some sort of archery event. It's going to be driven by the facts of how many folks would, attend said events and how it would fit in with the complex and to find the right value for that venue. That's yet to be determined. So but I really do appreciate all the comments that were given because they are very helpful. But realize, I think that I think these things can be skewed also for particular other purposes. But we're yet to calculate what is the right venue. So thank you for the chance to comment, Mr. Chairman.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add to this. I was really, really impressed with all of the things that came out in our state. I had no idea of the community's support within their communities of already having small to medium facilities already. The positive comments have been really meaningful as far as I've gone out. And I tried to get the survey out to as many people as possible, but I'm still getting results. And one of them, and I hope everybody writes this down as a major thing, is a paintball. So that's just been brought out from a few people, but I wanted to say that the attendance today is very impressive. All of the comments and how communities are working together to do this really means a lot to the interest of this and moving forward for me. So thank you, each and every one.
Thank you.
You had Mr. Davidson with his hand up.
Oh, Aaron.
Hey, I don't know if I'm down in Africa and I'm not sleeping in the normal schedule. So I spent a bunch of time looking through the NSSF reports on distribution of different types of shooting, whether it's rifle or archery or shotgun, et cetera. I just wanted to make a comment. I was surprised at how well the survey tracked those same distributions of weapon type. So I think as we move forward, I felt like our survey that we had, the results we had track really well with the national, large database surveys that the NSF provided, and that maybe that kind of bodes well for using both of those to rely on for data statistically.
Thank you. Great comment. Very accurate. One other thing I noticed on the survey was the desire for classrooms, meeting rooms, which I think speaks volumes about the hope that this will be an educational type facility. And that's one thing we noticed when we visited Cameo, was that their educational facility was on the back end of their build out. So, with the interest in an educational facility, the committee might look at where an educational facility would fit in the build out of this facility. And do we want perhaps to move it towards the front end rather than one of the last things to be added to the facility? So, yes.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of Game and Fish, we are very, very interested in a education facility in the upfront of this. In terms of hunter education and firearm certification, we already certify over 4,000 individuals a year, most of those children or young adults who are starting their hunting, interests and preparation and firearm training and safety. But we just launched a number of initiatives with the Department of Education and with support of the governor to do more conservation education in schools. And one of our initiatives is archery, and the other one's hunter ed, of course, that we think this facility would feed very nicely into. And per our agreement with the National Archery in Schools program, we will be hosting an annual archery tournament starting next year. And so we're building out our capacity in the hopes that this facility will feed nicely into the recruitment of Wyoming youth going forward.
Okay. Anything further on the survey comments? Karen, anything last? Any closing comments?
Yes, sir. I do want to say, even though I recognize that a large portion of the comments came in from those areas specifically that I mentioned, it was refreshing because representatives of 22 of Wyoming's 23 counties did respond. So while we may have gotten more response from specific areas that I mentioned, that doesn't mean that no one else in Wyoming responded. We did receive responses from, various locations. And as you mentioned, we did receive comments from out-of-staters. And specifically want to mention that those out-of-staters, all of them did score on the competitive shooting. And so I think it's refreshing to know that not only are we getting those responses, but we're getting those responses from people who are looking for that world-class facility as well.
Okay. So committee, I'd just like to, under item 4 on our agenda here, just talk a little bit about how you envision utilizing this data as we move forward. So I'm open to comments from the committee on suggestions for utilization of this survey results. Anybody want to chime in?
Please. Mr. Chairman, to me, I think it's a reference point that we go back to as we start making our decisions and start looking at the overall design and layout that we want to put out for proposal, that when we make those decisions and as we get ready to submit them, we just need to each go back to this list and make sure that we're representing not just our own personal desires, but also those of the people that have responded. And I think it's basically just a gut check as we continue to move forward and make sure we're in line with what people are asking for.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think one of the concerns that I would really like to have this committee be able to talk about a little bit more publicly would be, And it was brought up several times. I think there's some comments within the survey. I heard it at a Riverton Middle School football game last night from a concerned citizen about the cost. They said, we're having a hard time in our community being able to continue to make our ambulance service operate. Like who's gonna carry the water on this financially? And I think that's a big concern that a lot of folks are continuing to talk about, knowing that to try to get this to be able to operate in the black for a county or a municipality is probably a burden that many are concerned with. And I think that discussion, this probably ties back to the survey because there were comments in that, but I think we should maybe be able to have that discussion frankly on that.
I start out.
Mr. Co-Chair, jump in.
We have had this discussion, and so part of that cost is yet to be determined because we don't have a governance structure. And this gets back to the competitive nature of where the facility may very well end up. And so preliminary as part of the discussion was this, we have to yet to make a determination or recommendation of the governance. In other words, does the state just going to apply the capital construction money? And then is it going to be the sole responsibility of the local sponsor to do the operation and maintenance? Is it a joint powers board? Is it going to be a state-owned facility and a state-run facility with complete state employees? And if we do that, what agency is going to do that? Those decisions have not been made yet. From a standpoint of what we want to do is give the optimum amount of local participation. We'd like to hear back from those folks that want to host this facility. What's their ideas on how it should operate? Instead of us just, I mean, we could have wrote that into the legislature and says it's going to be another state park and just gone down that road. But I don't know that we would have been able to get this through the legislature. So the discussions that we had with the executive branch and the governor's office is let's put some seed money in there. And part of that seed money is directly Pittman Roberts funds that's specifically dedicated or eligible for these purposes. Some tourism money with the idea that this is going to attract a significant level of tourism in a small amount. So to a certain degree, some of the money that's already been allocated was already going to be spent for these purposes, just in a different way. And so that's where we're capturing some of that. But the actual come down to make a determination of what is it going to cost as far as the annual O&M and stuff. I think that's something that we put out in the RFP. And what I want to do personally is hear back and say, what's the county, what's the municipality, if there's a private nexus, somebody manufacturers willing to do some of the O&M and operation and maintenance. And then when we looked at the facility to the south down there at Cameo, there was a substantial local volunteer contribution to the operation and maintenance. And that's one of the things, again, that we'll put out there and say, look, what do you have as a volunteer base? One of the things they do down there for all of their volunteers, they get an annual free membership to go, but there's a certain number of volunteer days that they have to go out and help with the events or do some of the operation. And they even got volunteers to do some of the construction work. And so the idea that I can sit here and tell you exactly how that cost structure is going to work today until we get back proposals from those that would like to have this facility in their community, I can't answer that question. A lot of that will come back and say, what's the governance structure? Is this going to be a strictly state run, or are we going to allow maybe it's a county or a joint powers board type of infrastructure? So those decisions haven't been made. And until we get to that point, then we can start to answer what's it going to cost from a standpoint of the ongoing O&M. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that was important that it gets out there and that the public hear that. I know that has been a concern that's been brought up several times, knowing the financial burden that this could pose. So thank you for that explanation. I think that was valuable for the public to hear that.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to put this train back on the tracks again. Okay, we're not labor hell. We're talking about a shooting sports complex, and it's a national event is what we're trying to go towards, not in other sub issues. I realize they're all important issues, but we are here to try to discuss about how we put together a venue that's recognized in the United States of America as the #1 premier shooting sports complex that we can get together. And yes, it's going to cost money. And yes, I doubt it's going to be running in the black. This is more than that. And I just want to just refocus. I just don't want to get caught up into a sub conversation that frankly, I don't think is relevant to this conversation. I realize it's a public concern, but we're not here for that. We're here trying to work with you people and the people in the state of Wyoming on what we can construct that makes us set apart from the rest of the United States. And that's my goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And I also think it's important to recognize, running in the black versus value. A facility like this that brings in the Cameo complex, the number we heard was something in the range of $23 million economic impact. And so just like Hot Springs State Park, the cost of operating and maintaining that park probably exceeds the number of fees that it collects, right? But the value that it brings to the community of Thermopolis is what we're talking about here. So while we may not run in the black in terms of dollars generated at the gate of the complex versus the cost of the employees that operate it, the value to that community and that broader area surrounding it and the state in general is where we're going to see the payoff, in my estimation.
Yeah, and
Of
just
course.
to add, we actually had this conversation last night, a few of us. And so one of the things that we're looking at is the economic impact. So here's a cost, but here's the economic impact. And actually, as we start to look forward, that's one of the reasons the Wyoming Business Council has a membership on this committee, is to looking at that economic development opportunity. But we've also discussed as we start to get into this stage, starting to look at the economic impact. What happens if we bring 3 more manufacturers into the county? What happens with, you get 300 people from out of state that show up and stay in your use your airports, your motels, your gas stations, your campgrounds, your convenience stores, your sporting goods stores. What's the economic impact? And so, well, you can just say, well, the facility is running at this. What we need to do is say, what's the economic impact? That's the real value. And what we know is there's going to be a cost, and maybe painting the structures and grading the roads and replacing seal targets doesn't pay for it. But the economic impact will pay for itself over and over and over and over again. That's what we're looking at. It's not a cash flow on a building. It's a cash flow to the state of Wyoming, and that's the ultimate economics. And we'll hopefully work with Josh, with the Business Council, as we start to move this thing forward and start to look at even some of these other state facilities and how they're working. And like I said, the preliminary stuff that we got, I think it was alluded to was, it's in the millions and millions of dollars for some of these communities and the state that bring this in. That's how we got to look at the economics, not just utility bills and annual maintenance costs. So.
Okay. So now I'd like to kind of shift gears just a little bit, but on the same decision tree idea that Aaron brought up, and that is the NSSF data that was sent out to the task force on national shooting sports participation numbers and data. I found that pretty interesting. Again, you can see the growth. We got like 3 different years of data, and the growth is substantial. Shooting sports are becoming increasingly popular. I think that what I gleaned from that data was that we're on the right track, that this is a growing recreational industry in terms of what people spend to compete in these types of matches, and the number of people who come out to participate in these types of events, that our effort to create a state shooting complex is well timed. If anything, maybe we should have done it a few years ago, but The shooting sports continue to grow in popularity, the number of people, and especially for certain of these types of competitions. This is high-end competitors. This is like the pro golf type people, right? That come to your community and spend substantial money in order to participate in those events. And, you know, unlike many of our local competitions, which may also be held at this facility, when we're talking about these national and regional matches, some folks show up to spend substantial money. They're not staying at the Motel 6, right? They're staying in the nicer hotels, they're eating in the nicer restaurants, and they contribute generously to your local economy when they show up for these matches. Any other comments on the NSSF data? I don't know that Nephi has joined us yet. I think he was going to try and join us, but
The only
Mr.
thing that,
O'Connor?
and I don't know that if Wyoming mirrors the national, but one of the things that I found out that the fastest growing population segment is women and handguns. And you're seeing a significant nationwide is the fastest growing places that women that want to learn to shoot, and they want to learn to shoot with handguns. And I don't know if that tracks with Wyoming, but it certainly shows that opportunity out there to get more people involved within the shooting sports. And so.
anyone else? Game and Fish?
Mr. Chair, we're seeing that rate significantly within Game and Fish. In fact, we have a number of camps and trainings, both for outdoors, interest in education, and also for firearm training and whatnot for women. And we can't provide enough across the state. So we know that number is growing, and we're part of that national trend, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Other comments? There was a fairly substantial volume of data that was shared with the committee from the National Shooting Sports. And so I know Aaron said he spent some time digging through it, and I've started to get through most of it. But Aaron, any other takeaways from your review of the data?
Probably the one thought that I had, and maybe it's not right for this part of our discussion, is I suspect that we're going to run out of budget. And I think that's going to run right into our goals to have what we call a world-class facility. And I really think as we kind of get into this, there's two pieces that probably should be considered through all of our discussions, from now until we make some decisions and recommendations. The first one is, what are the shooting sports that we're, the 10-year plan? What do we want to attract? And I think we're going to end up having to pick some at the beginning that we're going to target and do really well. So if we pick just a couple at the beginning and we go all in on those and really make those ones the world-class facility, then when those competitors come or people come and use it recreational, when those people come use that range, they have an experience that they haven't had anywhere else. And if we win on those, even if it's not everybody, it's just that one group, maybe the most popular group or most prolific group. And then from there, maybe the next range or the next system that you build out, you do it the same approach. It's the best. It's better than anything else that's out there. And then everybody already knows you have a reputation for being the best for this other thing. That will translate immediately to now you're going to be the best for this next thing. And if we maybe take that approach that way. So if you go look at the data, right, somebody's going to get grumpy because there's really vocal people that participate in sporting activities or weapons that have very small groups, relatively small participation nationwide, small competitive segments. And so I think one of my takeaways was, how do we plan for the future and move in a direction where we're serving all of these areas, but still achieve world class with what we do and what we spend our money on with our limited budget. That I think there's something there that we should be considering as we go forward.
Thank you, Aaron. Very insightful. And I hope that communities that are thinking about putting proposals together are listening to this type of discussion, right? And so the 10 million from the state of Wyoming is to initiate this complex. Probably won't be the last state contribution to this complex as we build it out. There may be ways to generate a revenue stream on an ongoing basis to, build this to completion, but also what do the community proposals bring forth? Because if we get a community proposal that does not have electricity on site, does not have water and sewer, does not have paved roads out to it, right? Then we end up spending more of that $10 million just on basic infrastructure. And then you have less to contribute towards creating a world-class anything, right? And so as we look at these proposals, the availability of existing infrastructure will seriously be considered, because you can spend an awful lot of money just running water and sewer out to a clubhouse or a center out in the middle of the sagebrush someplace. So we have to be thoughtful about those kinds of things. But these are the kinds of factors that will be important in community proposals. What's out there, and so even though the geography might be terrific, but it's going to require 500 miles of water and sewer and electricity. Yeah, it's probably not going to happen, right? So we have to be real thoughtful about these sorts of things so we can then prioritize the money that we do have towards creating that world-class nature. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, and I think that's important. So, and Aaron, you bring up a big point. And so as we move forward, I've always anticipated no different than many of these facilities, they're phased, right? You're going to get to go for the biggest bang for the buck initially. But what's really important is that you have that built into your initial plan, AKA just the land acquisition alone needs to be in the concept that what happens 10 years ago and we start to attract, it may be the first business doesn't even move out, in proximity to this, but that has to be part of the plan. And so the initial $10 million for this, that was the seed money. That was to say, look, we're going to park this. We don't know what it's going to cost yet. So what we need to do as we move forward with this, and again, this is for any of those entities that are interested in participating, is we're going to put the proposal out there, but we're going to put the criteria out there that says, look, this is anticipated. This may be a decade-long build-out plan. And so to address some of those issues is initially we may not have enough money to put everything in, but we'll prioritize those things that we think that are going to provide the best of the most. But we have to have the space and the infrastructure. If you're going to bring in some type of manufacturing, they're going to need water and sewer systems. They're going to need electrical service. So you put all of that infrastructure in initially, and then you build out. So what I would anticipate that where we're going to end up with this is we're going to put the RFP out. We're going to say you have to have this much space, this much topography. You've got to look at water, sewer, electrical service. You have to have Wi-Fi at this place, all of these things. And then we're going to design the facility for everything we want. And then once we have that design, then we're going to say, look, now how does it fit? And then where do we prioritize to do the initial construction? Does that kind of comport with what you're thinking, Aaron, as far as if you don't have a vision and a plan, then you're going to get constrained by, you don't want to be replacing the water line 6 years down to the road or having to pull in additional electrical service. So this will be a build out over time. This is exactly what's going on down, at the facility to the south. They're continually going to be adding on to this, but get your initial infrastructure and land and everything in place. and then allow that to facilitate that move forward. And again, the 10 million that we currently have in the account was initial seed money. And, you know, it's just our job as the legislators here to go back and say, look, when I've got 22 counties, 61 municipalities that are interested in this, that will help drive additional leverage for any state resources moving forward in the future. So we're not constrained, I would say, with the 10 million. That's just a starting point. So does that help, Aaron? And is that kind of consistent with your, you know, get the ones early on within the constraints of our budget, and then but have the plan to build out?
Yes, I agree with that. And just thankful that I am not a politician that has to satisfy everybody in this thing.
Aaron,
Mr.
I don't know
Chairman.
if there's any politicians up here, and if there is, we're not very good at it.
Mr. Chairman, I have some questions on the decision tree. I think it's in the decision tree section. If not, we can push it down to request for proposal. But as we know, there's a bunch of communities here that are very interested in this and already very active. Those that I've had a chance to talk to, I've tried to warn them, we don't know what we're doing yet. So for you to start trying to match that might be a little premature. But I would like to, you know, I don't have a clear vision yet from us of what product we're going to put out for them to react to. I've heard that we're going to have a very clear list of what we want. I've also heard that we're going to wait and see what the communities present to us. And so, you know, I feel part of the purpose of the task force is to start refining down before we put the communities to work on that they should have an idea of what we're looking for and what those time gates are so that they can appropriately spend their energies and their community's money.
I'd agree. And I think on the decision tree aspect of that, you know, what comes first, right? Putting the cart before the horse. And I think we're going to talk about a little bit later, kind of a pre-proposal from the communities that are interested to, and we'll give some general parameters, but still leave it pretty general at this point, pretty wide open, so that communities that might be able to have a unique feature, we can address that as the proposals come in, but generally talk about the size, get some early data from the communities that are interested in terms of distances, utilities, infrastructure, size of the location that they're looking at, land ownership, those types of general parameters. And but not necessarily jump into, well, we need, you know, 25 pistol shooting bays and a 2,000 meter rifle range and so forth. But the first round would be more that infrastructure location piece. And then we can move forward from that point on our decision tree as far as the details. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, and to just follow up on that, specifics, right? So that's what the whole discussion is on the RFP. But what we're going to do is we're going to put out a pre-proposal and say, these are the criteria that you need to tell us what you have. So let's use an example. Number one's got to be land. You have to have some place to put the thing. And so we've done some preliminary analysis. And so we'll say, look, this is going to take on the bare bones, absolute minimum, 800 acres. Desirable is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,600 acres. Preferable, you know, is going to be 2,500 acres. I mean, you're going to need almost 2 square miles to be able to do this thing and do it right. That's the gold standard that we want to shoot for. That will be in the pre-proposal, say, you know, what can you provide within this range? How far are you from any known water, electrical service? What type of road network? Property needs to have a high degree of topographic relief. You know, how much topography? Give us a map of what you're thinking of. And the idea is to get communities up to say, okay, it's going to take a pretty good chunk of land. We're not talking about 1,000 flat yards across. We're talking about 2,000 yards on the side of a mountain. We'll have stuff in there that's like, what's the vegetation types? Ideally, you'd like something that's semi-forested and something that's just sagebrush, badlands type of facilities. And so put all that framework together. I anticipate, depending on how the discussion goes this afternoon, that we'll have those pre-proposals out by the end of November. And at that point in time, it'll be up to the committee to decide how long do we want to leave those out there for those communities to now say, okay, now we know what we have to go look for. Land, topography, utilities, infrastructure, Wi-Fi, how does that fit in? And then so the question becomes for us is, if we put that out there, say it's available late November, how long do we want to wait till we get these pre-proposals back? And you, Mary, somebody may look at it and said, we just don't have a place that's going to work. There's no Wi-Fi, we know there's no groundwater, even though there's no gravel roads or paved roads or whatever that is, but it'll help start to fine tune those processes for them to go look where, and then get some preliminary ideas. They're their experts, they're their local communities. And so they can work with their own groups to start to put that together. Question for us will be, and we'll work through that whole list of stuff today. But I agree with the coach here. We're not at the point to say, give us a design. When it comes to the actual design of the facility, I think that we'll probably provide that to the local communities. In other words, we need 10 pistol bays, we need a 22 range, here's an indoor range and all of that stuff. That'll be a function that the committee probably puts together in consultation with whoever gets the final award. But time frame wise, that's what we're looking at, is to get that out by late November. The question will become, how long do we leave that out there? I would hope that we would get input back from those people that want to submit proposals. Is 60 days enough? Do you need 90 days, 120 days? Again, we want to make this, facilitate this, that works for everybody as much as possible. Does that help?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it does in a way. I haven't, I guess, wrapped my head around the pre-proposal yet, because tasking them to find something that we don't know what it is yet seems a little cart before the horse. And so, like, if we know we're going to focus on these top 8 issues and not the all 12 on the list, it maybe takes off some, or it adds. If we're going to really want to feature long range competitive shooting, it could change a couple of different things. But so I know we have our survey, we've kind of digested it, but like I said, I've seen some people really, really excited, and they've got this is the only place it can be. But I'm like, we have not put out that criteria yet. Maybe we'll get through that today and it'll be easy, good to go. But I just want to make sure that when we start spending people's resources, that it's in a way that benefits the end result.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to touch back on the land acquisition part of this issue, which is obviously, I think, a huge impediment to a lot of folks maybe having the space to do this, which in fact will probably take care of the venues because it's a large space. The issue is when a proposal comes in my mind, it has to be substantive. It can't be pie in the sky. It can't be, well, maybe if this works and that works, and by the time all your dominoes fall down, it works out for us. It has to be something that is tangible and achievable. And I realize the next breath will be all you folks that are interested, and everybody that is interested. I think, frankly, in my mind, it would be a disservice to you if you didn't really understand the criteria as soon as you could, because either you can make it or you can't, and whatever that happens to be at the end, yet to be determined. But obviously, people are putting a lot of time and effort and thought in this, and I think everybody as a legislator knows what it's like to lose, and it doesn't feel good no matter when it happens. But I just wish it was tangible, identifiable acquisitions that can happen that would work if that's going to be in the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the chance to comment.
Welcome. So today's agenda is a little challenging and that so many of these things overlap with each other. So I'm quite comfortable with the committee moving back and forth on these agenda items as we move forward. I do understand that there's someone has a short video on the Whittington Center NRA complex. Maybe we want to show that if that's available.
Mr. Chairman, we might want to put a pause on that. It's in a format that I cannot access, so I've asked LSO and Cheyenne to see if they can convert it for me.
Okay. Very good. It's nice to have resources around that help us out, but we'll pause on that one for a little bit. Yeah, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, if I could go back to the pre-proposal piece and just get some clarification on your end. Communities, counties, whatever, put in a proposal, a pre-proposal. Is it one of those where they make the cut and it gets narrowed down? Or is it one of those where we go back to them and say, you're lacking a few things, come back to us with more information? Can you help clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I would not envision that the pre-proposal is a gate. Rather, it's a way of communicating to us what's available out there. And from my point of view, once we see what some of these locations might look like, it might be obvious that one aspect of our design might be really, really well suited for that location. And so maybe we put that into phase one, where if we get a different location with some different topography, maybe a different aspect is more suitable for that world-class development initially at that location. So I think the predetermination might cause a community to realize that maybe the location that they were initially considering may not be adequate. And maybe they then shift gears and look for a different location, or that they say, boy, this is a bigger deal than we can possibly manage. And so they withdraw themselves. But I don't see, at least it's not my anticipation, that the committee or task force would use those pre-proposals as a decision point to eliminate any of the communities, that they would in fact have that opportunity to supplement and augment those initial proposals if it was possible for them to do so.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, and maybe this will add clarity to the discussion. Maybe it won't. It's more likely that it won't, but maybe a way to think of this initial proposal is that it's a proposal by communities describing their readiness to propose, that they have what needs to be in place, or a plan to have what needs to be in place at some point. An analogy could be in the world of economic development, where Wyoming looked at the end of the 90s and said, we're not business ready. Communities then said, well, we want to propose to the business council that you fund business parks without a prescription of a precise business to go into those. And maybe that's the step we're at, is where we were looking at industrial park development originally in a readiness fashion, instead of directly the shooting facility needs to be here. Maybe our first step is having communities describe their readiness for that development. I know that's potentially splitting hairs in a lot of ways, but it at least helps my feeble brain understand where our first steps are.
Thank you. I do think that's helpful, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what the pre-proposal is. And so it's like, you're going to have so much space. I mean, if we put a 2,000 yard range in, you got to have 1.5 miles. How can you submit a proposal if you don't know that? So this is the proposal is this is just to say, these are the parameters that you have to work with, right? It's going to have things like, well, how many camping spaces? Look at the respondents. You know, how many private, how many public? Is there already satisfied within this community that you have X number of RV hookups? Okay, that's what we need to know. But what we have to do is get to kind of your analogy, is get people looking at and say, okay, we can address this question. In other words, we're trying to lead you to ask the question, how much land are we going to need? how much topography do we have available? I'm not talking about going out and buying a parcel of ground now. These are the parameters. You're going to need to go look for something like this. Do you have the RV park capacity? What's the travel distance from a local and a regional airport? That's important. What other amenities that you might have out there? One of the things that we've heard over and over again, that a lot of these people will bring their families and are looking for other activities. So think about that. The only thing we're going to do is frame up these pre-proposals and say, okay, these are when we put the full-blown RFP out, you've already given some thought to, what's the county road or what's the state highway system that gets to a potential facility? What kind of infrastructure is available? But more than anything is to try to say, look, you need to start looking at these issues. That's what the pre-proposal is designed to do. It will not be used as a screening tool. It's just to give you information to say, this is the things that you're going to have to address when the proposal comes out, and look at those. And so is that kind of the analogy that you were trying to get to? Yep. That's what the pre-proposal will do.
Okay. Representative Altman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to reiterate kind of what everybody's been saying here, I've been hearing the scuttlebutt. This isn't going to be a massive thing that's just built by the state. This is going to be something that is put into a community to benefit the state. And so what I've been hearing so far, and it's really been encouraging, is I've been hearing the municipalities and the county commission and business people and even the educational place, but everybody, and that's what we've been trying to do, is to get the conversations out there and even multiple communities to work together to say, okay, this is what we have. This is what we could provide. Now we're getting more information. Where could that work? And how could we work it? And for everybody to be sitting around over coffee or whatever, and to be figuring it out. And it's very, very good to see all of those entities. So it's not just one business or one person that says, this is what I want to do. This is people working together to make this thing phenomenal. So I appreciate all the interest and hope that it will just continue to expand.
Okay. With that, I'd like to open up to some public comment. All of you have been patiently listening to us blabber on up here. I'd be very interested to hear what you all think you might need from the task force in terms of direction, in terms of ideas or questions that you might have about this process. Again, I think it's premature to hear proposals at this point, but I do want to hear if you have concerns or suggestions on perhaps how this pre-proposal process might work. And if you think we need more information before we could even contemplate moving forward, what information do you think you need? Those sorts of things. So anybody in the room that would like to come forward, please come up to the microphone, hit the little button, turn it green, and tell us who you are and ask us questions or offer comments, and we'll do our best to.
Any affiliations?
Yes, and if you're affiliated with a group or business or community, let us know, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and Council. My name is Josh Millick. I work for the Wyoming State Trails Program, I'm part of the State Parks Division. And in my volunteer time, I am a 4-H shooting sports leader. I had the distinct privilege of chaperoning the 4-H seniors to Raton, New Mexico, to the Whittington Center just 4 weeks ago. And I was pretty impressed by the facility. And I had just a few facts about it that I thought might be helpful to our thinking about what we might need. And of course, it's a bit of a different model because, you know, the one in Colorado and what we're thinking about here is a little bit different because they are a 501c3. It's also big. It is built on 33,000 acres. Now, the actual shooting ranges and everything don't take up that whole 33,000 acres, but It is a large chunk of land. And it also helps you spread out the different disciplines because some things just don't mix well with other activities, right? A couple of points I learned about that. The Raton area, it's a small community, 6,000 people, and they estimate that they get $7 million worth of economic impact from the center. The center itself in 2021 brought in $9.86 million and had expenses of $4.19 million. So they netted $5 million. So those are just some facts that I thought would be helpful to thinking about this.
Thank you. I've been to Whittington. I don't know if others have been as well. It was a shooting range built many years ago.
1973.
At one point, Casper was actually considered for that facility, and the NRA people came to Casper and did a site assessment, and sadly it went to Raton. But I'm sure the people of Raton are delighted that the Whittington Center is in their community. So I think the shooting sports have evolved a bit since Whittington was built, and we're going to want to make sure that our facility reflects how those shooting sports have changed and try to build into ours the capacity to adapt as the shooting sports change in the future, because it's not a static game out there anymore, right? So when you went to Whittington, what feature, what aspect of it really struck you as most impressive?
I think the most impressive facilities at the center were the shotgun facilities, the trap facilities, the skeet facilities, and then the clay facilities were just amazing. And that's something, the topography and, like you mentioned, the forested areas and things like that are really come into play there, because you need to be able to walk the courses, and you don't want to just be out in a desolate wasteland there. But the clay throwing machines, they had them set up in amazing ways. I mean, stuff coming at you, stuff going away from you, coming from over your head. You were standing on ridges, shooting off into valleys. You were standing at the base of hills, shooting up into the hills. Just the variety that was available was pretty awesome.
Thank you. Questions from the task force? Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kenny Langford. I'm here on my own, and I also represent Wyoming State Shooting Association.
Can we get your name, please?
Kenny Langford. And I'm president of the Wyoming State Shooting Association. I've been a competitor since I was 13 years old, which ends up totaling 57 years. Started out at 13, finished up and still going at 70 years old. I'm the national champion, the match rifle from NRA championships this year. So that gives me a host of qualifications in the competitive shooting. I've also was on the board in the ad hoc committee of the city of Laramie, which created from scratch the Laramie Rifle Range. So we got involved on the same thing you guys are doing. What do we build? Who do we address? Where do we get the land? Where do we get the funding? How do we go into operations? And how do we address the public? And we started out 30 years ago, and it's still going strong. A couple of years ago, when I took over as president of the State Shooting Association, we met with the governor's staff with kind of a vision, semi-proposal of how to address the shortfalls of Governor Meade's shooting initiative that brought up a lot of good ideas, but stopped short, whether it was the election or term limits for Governor Meade. So there was a lot of good discussions in that by a lot of qualified people. And we took a look at that and submitted a proposal somewhat similar, but somewhat different that may be helpful in your quest in this facility. And this is basically not so much a single location, but multiple locations. And within this proposal, we suggested that you take a look and inventory around the state of facilities and their how they address what type of shooting. Because you may have one facility that's really great at high power, another one that's really great in shotgun shooting, another facility that's just the top of the line at Wyoming standards for free gun and pistol shooting. And I pretty well personally felt that state parks would be deeply involved in this as kind of the Wyoming side of the governing agency with the Joint Powers Board to oversee public funding may be available from Pittman Robertson and special grants to be applied to different ranges around the state that could apply for grants and operate under special interest, so to speak, where one has got 2,000 acres and can do a 2,000 yard range. Another one might be a beautiful river setting that's really great for shotgun. In Wyoming, it's going to be somewhat difficult and an obstacle that can be overcome to have a single site to deal with all these multiple types of shooting, especially once you start getting up to a world-class facility. I would personally be hesitant to put all your money in just a two-type world-class facility that doesn't serve the residents and shooting public of Wyoming, because they in part are going to be funding a huge part of this. And also the Game and Fish is going to be the representative for Pittman Robertson funds. And they've also got to allow their budget to absorb that, because Pittman Robertson goes a lot for conservation and other types, as well as public shooting and ranges. And you also need to address education. I was fortunate to live in Wyoming and through the schools, hunter safety, get into rifle shooting. That's been a godsend to me for over 50 years. And within that, we need to continue watching out for our public youth and also education. There's no money coming out for education on the federal level. Matter of fact, the current administration withdrew all funding for any education for hunting and firearms, such training in the schools. And that's being challenged right now by a multitude of senators and representatives at the federal level. So with that, I think another consideration might be multiple facilities where you could have multiple municipalities funding that portion of the shooting. It may not be under one facility, but it may spread out in certain areas, especially in the seasonal sort of sports. This can't be a year-round facility in Wyoming unless you have an indoor range or return to the educational aspect of it during the winter. And also with the state trails or state parks, they could oversee it. There's a possibility they could issue permits like they do snowmobile or over the road permits to Wyoming residents that could they could buy a state parks permit and allow them to use any of these facilities around the state. So again, that's another option. I certainly support your efforts for a single use facility, and I hope to see one of the greatest things built, and I'd like to see our youth picked up. We've got over 500 kids in the 4-H shooting sports that show up to the Douglas shooting match every summer. And we've got other youth groups, American Legion, Wyoming Education Corps that deal with the youth. And these can be a big part of this because they're going to be the future. Unfortunately, at my age and some of our shooting, you've got new groups of shooting coming up, and you've got others sort of expiring. Although some of the meets I go are some of the very best shooters in the country, sometimes when I look around the firing line, it seems like a senior center event, which is unfortunate. And these are truly dedicated people, but we've got a whole background of people that's going to follow our footsteps, and especially as far as utilizing their right to the Second Amendment. So that's what I've got to say about it.
All right, Ken, thank you very much for being here today. Task Force, any questions for Ken?
Yeah, Mr. Langford, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. I'm curious, what's the best contact for you? I think that you're going to be a valuable resource in this process as it moves forward, and I'd like to be able to communicate with you directly.
If you don't want to give that out over the
You can
internet, you can just give it to our staff.
Business card to your staff here, and she can.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. As far as the single sport concept, I think my hope is that we are flexible enough and nimble enough that if that ultimately seems to be the best course of action, that this task force can make that kind of recommendation, where maybe the trap, skeet, clays might go in one community, long range rifle might go in another community, archery in another community. That may ultimately be what the task force recommends. At this point, we're visualizing a co-located massive all sport kind of complex, but nothing is ruled out. And so I think some of these proposals, as they come in from the communities, if they have a particular sport that they think their location is just heads and tails above anything else that we could possibly find, that can be identified in their proposal for us. And then as we evaluate the reality of what we have in terms of infrastructure, land, and so forth, we might, as a task force, end up saying having multiple Wyoming state shooting facilities scattered about the state might be the approach that we take. So it's not where we're leaning at this point, but I think we're flexible enough that if the reality is what it is, we can go that route. But I think that's a valid point. Follow up?
Thank you. I would think that would warrant some consideration. And also with my contact info, I can also provide electronic form, and I can provide it in hard copy form, our proposal to the governor's staff from a couple of years ago.
No sense reinventing the wheel. So thank you. Anyone else in the room?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to follow up with this gentleman, by darn, because he's right along the line of what I'm thinking. I'm Jim Gill. I'm the mayor for the city of Worland, but he mentioned, by darn, working with other municipalities, and that's exactly what I think we can get done here in the Bighorn Basin and the Wind River Valley here. We have a shooting complex at Worland. I'm an advocate for that, but I'm going to let Tom Outland, our shooting expert, he's worked his behind off building a premier shooting complex for Worland and Morski County. But first of all, I want to thank you very much for coming up into our area, because the action's always down in Cheyenne and Casper, and all the interstates are east of us or south of us. So we need a little economic activity up in the Bighorn Basin. And I'm an advocate for the Bighorn Basin in this area as well. We'd love to, it would be a piece of cake. We've got water supreme. We've got one of the best artesian water systems at Worland. And it's a regional system now that reaches across much of the southern Bighorn Basin. We got plenty of water. We'll get sewer, we'll get gas, we can make it happen. We got some cowboys, Indians, farmers. We've got sportsmen. They're excited about much of this, and by darn, we want to thank you again for coming up this way and give us a chance to pitch our hay up with you here. Thank you.
Well, Jim, certainly you don't lack the enthusiasm. Hell, I'm with you, bud. Now there's a politician. Anyway, but thank you, Jim, very much. Do appreciate you coming down here today. And so it really is you know, the thing that I had never anticipated when we first started this is the amount of what I've already seen as a collaborative effort within communities, and that's always a good thing. So with that, our next guest, if you'd please identify yourself and any affiliations.
Good morning. I'm Jason Wilson. I run a small company here in town called Lucid Optics. I also work with the NRA on range development services. I am an RTTA through them, which is a range technical team advisor. I've been doing that for over 15 years, and I've had the luxury and privilege to design, develop, work with ranges across the globe. I've worked in Germany. I've worked extensively in the US. I am now currently working on a project in South Africa. When we start talking about a project like this and we throw around a term like world class, we need to understand what we're really talking about. There are some shooting complexes on this planet that are pretty substantial. A lot of them came from military backgrounds where the camp installation like Camp Perry, Camp Atterbury have a very substantial shooting complex, which is now brought in civilian use. So it's quite impressive, but they've had the benefits of military funded infrastructure. When we start talking about world-class facilities, the NRA Whittington Center is the one in the United States to talk about. Second to that would be Ben Avery, just in sheer size and capabilities. As a point of reference in that discussion, the Whittington Centers is 33,000 acres. Gun Sight, which is the next largest, but it's more of a private club, highly education oriented, that's 3,700 square acres. So Ben Avery goes down to the list at 1,650, and Cameo is sitting at 2,500, and they're still developing. So that's an emerging range on the radar. Camp Perry, very well known, but it's only 1,000 acres. And it struggles with infrastructure when they have a big competition. So world-class facility, shooting sports is about half of it. The rest of it is going to be amenities for the people that come and go. Location's another. If you're looking at this to generate economic development and tourism boards, place it someplace in the center of the state so the people have to travel through to get there. I hear a lot of talk about airports and access to interstates. While the interstates are welcome, airports aren't necessarily a high flyer because shooters don't travel with their firearms in the airports anymore. They drive. That's why you see RV parks really, really sought after at a facility. If you're going for a multidiscipline facility, the NSSF statistics and their topics are key. That is the trends, and that's where things are going. If you're going to phase develop it, pick your first top three and move on from there. But infrastructure first, and can't forget people. When you start talking about people on a shooting range, we're not just talking about recreational shooters or competitive shooters. We're talking about trainings, both civilian and military trainings, law enforcement trainings. You can bring in celebrity trainers and fill 3,000 or 4,000 people in a weekend with the right courses and classes. All those folks eat, sleep, and spend time in Wyoming. So I look forward to working with you guys all if you're interested from a professional capacity on defining what world-class facility really looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Very useful. Will you make sure we have your contact information over here for the staff? We've been at this now for an hour and a half. I'd like to take like a 10-minute break, let everybody stretch and go to the restrooms and so forth, and we'll come back and continue public comment. And I think we have that video adapted so that we can show the Whittington Center video. So thank you. We'll take 10 minutes. in typical Wyoming fashion, sometimes the best work gets done over a cup of coffee on the break, right? So thank you all for chiming in. Further, we have the video, I'm told, available for Whittington Center. Let's go ahead and play that video and then we'll move on with public comment. I think. Okay, so let's take some public comment from someone in the room. Dr. Devine.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. For the record, my name is Darren Devine. Although I am the president of Casper College, I'm here today not in that capacity. I am here as a competitive pistol shooter. And so in fact, I must apologize. I have to leave here in a couple hours. I'm going down to Colorado Springs to help run the Colorado State match, which starts tomorrow. So I apologize. I can't be with you all day. I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, and most importantly, thank you. Thank you for your fledgling service. I say fledgling because the heavy lift is yet to occur, as you all know. And so thank you in advance for that as well. This is an important topic, and I will say, although I'm not going to offer too many one-sided opinions, I hope I will say that I absolutely support all the shooting sports and shooting opportunities, and whatever this committee comes up with, I'm sure will be wonderful. I would like to offer one point of view, both as a potential proposal inputter, but also as committee members and being on that side of the table on multiple projects. At some point, you're going to have to define, at some point, you're going to look at yourselves and say, were we successful? You know, did these proposals bring us success? And so I think, although you're doing this already, and I know that, I'm just going to offer one point of view. I think you're going to have to, sooner than later, if you already haven't, come up with a couple guiding principles. And the first of those is, what's the point? Is the point economic development? Is the point growing shooting sports in the state? Is the point bringing in people from outside the state? And all these are good. And I'm not suggesting one is more important than the other, but I am suggesting that you're going to have to decide which of those may be primary and secondary and tertiary. Otherwise, when you come to decide what was successful, you're going to have a hard time. And I know that because I failed at that so many times, I'm embarrassed to admit it. So I think you're going to have to spend a little bit of time. I'm sure you already have. I don't mean that in any disrespect at all, but you're going to have to really define what's the primary goal. And then I think that's going to help you define which of these sports you want to prioritize. I think the idea of one center, quote unquote, is great. I think the idea of multiple centers is also great. But those are diametrically opposed. And so that's going to be a tough decision for you. And so obviously, once you've decided what the goal is, the primary goal, there's multiple goals, and I understand that. Once you decide what the primary goal is, I think that'll help you define which of the sports or which of the events, because building shooting sports for 4-H in the state of Wyoming, which is a wonderful goal, really doesn't comport with shooting competitions necessarily, right? So they're different ideas, they're great ideas, but you're going to have to, help you guide which those you want to do, and that'll help, I think, guide you which of the shooting sports or the events that you really want to focus on. Again, as a citizen of Wyoming, I'm happy and will support whatever the committee comes up with. But I do think also, as for communities who want to put in a proposal, it's going to be tough. And I completely understand where you're coming from and think it's wonderful, but it's going to be tough if you say, give us what you got. Well, if they put all their eggs in a basket for 400 square acre archery range, and you're looking for something that has a minimum of 2 sports, well, they put all their effort in something that's really not going to work. And so the earlier that you can come up with some basic criteria that are pretty well put a box around it, I think would be better. But again, that's just one person's point of view. So thank you very much. Again, most of all, thank you for your support, and thank you for your service in this important conversation.
Task force, any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so Dr. Devine, on that point is, and so we've had some discussions. I'm acutely aware of the fact that we don't want to do what you just described, that somebody puts, too many eggs in one basket, and they may have just missed the point inadvertently. And so I think that's the concept that we've come back, which we haven't absolutely solidified, of multiple rounds. And what I actually anticipate, pre-proposal, proposal, first round is a screening criteria, and then go back and say, look, you missed the part, right? And this is why this is going to take a little bit longer, because we really do want to create the best that we're capable of creating and get everybody a fair shot. So the first, get through the pre-proposal that sets the framework, right? And then a proposal. What can you bring to the table? My anticipation is we will evaluate those, and we may make comments back to every single one of those and say, you're strong here, weak there. Would you like another bite at the apple? And then a final proposal would be the third go round. So there would be ample time to interact to make sure that somebody that may be able to address those concerns just didn't get it right in the first proposal. And I'm very cognizant that we do not want that to happen. And so under that scenario, do you think that, the pre-proposal, the proposal, and then the final proposal, an evaluation is a better scenario? Well, it's time consuming. I'm just very cognizant that we don't want to eliminate anybody based on an oversight. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Hicks, I think that's, in my mind, I think that's a great way to go. What I didn't hear, and I'm sure you're thinking about, is, in my mind, each of those steps would be tighter and tighter.
They're gonna get narrow.
Yeah, but at the first, if the first one, and I'm not suggesting in any way this is a negative comment, if the first one is y'all come, awesome, that's fantastic. The second one would need to be, okay, after y'all come, here's what we heard, here's, so now we're gonna say, you really need to have this if you're gonna move forward. And then the next one would be, really need to have this if you're gonna continue to submit.
And I think that our goal today is to try and give them a better sense of, if you need this, before they send in their first pre-proposal.
You know, and then to follow up on that, and again, we haven't solidified this, but committee, this is something we discussed at the last time. So one of the things that once we get the pre-proposals out there, between the time that we get those back and the time that we then turn around and put a full-blown proposal out there, we've got to develop some objective ranking criteria. It can't be subjective, you know, and again, whatever that scale is, 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 the worst. And so every category that we put down there has got to have some matrix that says this is a decision-making matrix, that this how we're going to rank these proposals. It just can't, because again, in our position, we got to be very cognizant of that. We can't have a perceived bias for any community. And we've got to come back to every single person that submits, entity that submits a proposal, and show them under an objective ranking system, this is why you didn't rank out. Because ultimately, we're going to have to stand up on the floor of the Senate and the House and defend this decision of this task force and say, here's why your community didn't get it. And so that's the next, so the next two big tasks for this committee is going to be, number one, develop the proposal, and then develop those objective ranking criteria. So let me give you an example. So we put this out there and some community comes back and say, you know, we've got 800 acres. It's perfect. So we rank that. Well, we'd like to see a lot more. It's pretty constrained for potential future growth. So you're going to get a 4. But the driving distance is outstanding. It's only 15, 20 minutes out of town, right? You're going to get a 1 for that. At the end of the day, it'll all shake out and we'll look at that total score. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear. You can then not allow some determination for extraneous factors. Numeric absolute ranking will also get you in trouble. It is a guidance that when we get there, and what we're probably going to end up is, again, we're going to end up with 1, 2, or 3 that are probably pretty close. At that point in time, we're just going to have to evaluate them and make a recommendation. But that should get us to that top 1, 2, or 3. What's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, Senator Hicks, absolutely. And there are 2 guiding thoughts in my head, and I'll share them so you can laugh at me and see how little I'm creative I am. One, I think was one of the comments earlier, that if you look at the Shooting Sports Foundation data, you know, and the survey data, that's a great touch point for you to go back and go, yeah, we're in line with that data, and we're in line with what people have said. The second part is I do know quite a bit about Cameo. I was really fortunate to work the first several big matches there, and talk with Walt, if you went down, you met Walt, a wonderful guy. You know, Walt and I've talked a lot previous to this. Actually, we've talked a lot before this ever came up. But you know, Cameo's stated goal, and I am in no way suggesting this is what your stated goal will be or should be. But having said that, Cameo's stated goal was they wanted to compete for the national championships in pistol, 3-gun, multi-gun. They had a list that they wanted. That was their stated goal. And so I think without having one of those stated goals, or 2 or 3 of them that you're focusing on, I think that ranking or that rubric, which absolutely is critical, and you're absolutely right, Chairman Hicks, having made this mistake multiple times, if you don't leave a category in your rubric that allows you to address creativity or that wow factor that you talked about, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I have lots of holes in my feet that I can show you having done that. So that would be my only caveat to that is, I think that's where you really have to have, before you develop that rubric, you have to have at least some idea of what's the goal. Is the goal, what's the primary goal? Is it competitive shooting sports? Is it building a shooting culture in our youth? I think both of those are equally important. That's why I'm glad I don't have your job and having to weigh those out. But I think you're going to have to do that. I think the earlier you do that, the better it's going to be for you as a committee, from my opinion.
Thank you very much. All right, I understand we have Nephi Cole on Zoom. Let's bring him in for some testimony. Good morning, Nephi.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate it. I've been listening to this entire time, and I apologize that I've been in YouTube instead of on Zoom. I'm not sure that I have a whole lot to share with the committee. I think that a lot of the comments that have been made thus far are entirely appropriate. I think Darren's spot on when he talks about where to go and other facilities. I think you have an enormous amount of institutional expertise in the people that are in that room, from the Wyoming State Shooting Sports Association, from Mr. Devine and his work and what he's done. And I think it's very important to consider all that information. I look forward to continuing to listen. From the National Shooting Sports Foundation perspective, I can't tell you that we would say that, you know, one way is better than another, but I think that it is important to kind of identify your goals. Community ranges, local ranges are awesome resources, and they're extremely valuable to those communities in terms of small scale events and large range facilities that draw national and international matches, large scale attention very frequently. Those are an entirely different type of facility that we see as also being important and appropriate for states to consider and have. As you know, our members are the folks that pay the Pittman-Robertson tax. That 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition comes exclusively from my membership. We're extremely proud of the Wyoming Game and Fish and all the work that they do, and then the partnership that this kind of an opportunity represents for them. From the Pittman-Robertson funding perspective, as you know, up to a quarter of Pittman-Robertson funding coming into a state can be used for hundreds of education activities, including the building and development, the maintenance of ranges. And we see this as being a very great opportunity in the future. The other thing that I'd encourage you guys to look at, and Kenny talked about this briefly, was that under the previous administration, the Meade administration, there was a program called the Open Ranges Initiative. The Open Ranges Initiative looked at using public lands and opening more ranges on public lands. I'd encourage all those folks who are looking at an opportunity to develop a facility to look at specifically public lands such as state lands, and how utilizing those lands in a process like this can augment what they have available in county opportunities and local opportunities, and how you might be able to utilize state lands as a resource in building out a facility. With that, you know, I will just stay on the Zoom for questions. If there's something I can do to be helpful, I'm always here to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Nephi, could you just quickly, I know there's a ton of data in the materials that you sent to us, but what are the big trends that you're seeing from the National Shooting Sports Foundation that we ought to take into account as we consider the development of the shooting complex?
So the first thing I'd say is growth is a trend. So we've seen huge growth in the types of people that are participating in shooting sports, especially in and around urban areas. Not surprisingly, a lot of the types of shooting sports that people want to participate in coincide really well with sales. So if you look at the sales of firearms and ammunition, you have an increasing interest in shooting sports activities that have something to do with semi-automatic handguns. That's about 50% of the market in the United States of America's handguns. So that's where you see USPSA and IDPA and other areas that allow people to shoot those handguns. That has a lot of popularity. And so those are small bays and things like that. Of course, the AR style rifle, that is the most commonly sold rifle in the United States of America, is a semi-automatic center fire rifle in the .223 caliber. And so shooting sports that allow you to make use of a rifle like that are popular. We've seen enormous growth in the long range shooting, the precision rifle shooting, and that coincides with a lot of advancements in optics and lasers. And then shotgun shooting sports continue to be extremely extremely desirable for folks. And the one thing that I would share with you on the shotgun shooting sports side to consider, and maybe this is kind of a broader consideration overall. I know you guys talked about archery, and I can't agree enough. Archery is extremely popular. It's growing as well. You probably need to identify what other people are doing well, and then also identify if there's some kind of a niche that Wyoming fits uniquely well. There's some phenomenal shotgun facilities in the Midwest, the United States, that have, I would say, their infrastructure for shotgun shooting sports, particularly for trap and skeet, it's enormous. And so it would probably be difficult to compete with a facility like that if your goal were to say host the national high school trap and skeet championships. Minnesota is going to have a leg up probably in that regards. So I think it's going to be challenging and important to identify, okay, well, you can have a well-rounded facility, but what does Wyoming offer that nobody else really does? I think that there are clearly some things that Wyoming does really well. I think Wyoming is the best place on earth. That's why I live here. There are things that we do that nobody else can possibly match in terms of vistas and availability of space, in terms of the types of experiences and opportunities that you can have in Wyoming that you can't have around other facilities. So I would say make sure that you consider those things in your rubric. Most competitors, when they come to these events, they don't come to these events. They may come to these events just for the competition, but they have families and they have wives and they have kids, and they also like to fish and they also like to do other things. And so typically what you'll see is when people come from out of state, they look for a great excuse to bring their family with them. And if they can do something else, if their spouse or children can do something else, or they can expand their vacation opportunity around the shooting sports as well, so that just becomes a part of what they're going to the state to do, that bodes really well for the facility and for bringing people in to participate in a given area.
Nephi, thank you for that. And you may not want to answer this, but from your perspective, is there one or more of these shooting sports where there seems to be a deficit or a gap in terms of the quality of facilities around the country? You mentioned that trap and skeet, that market's pretty well covered in terms of phenomenal trap and skeet ranges. But does one of these sports have a lack of resources for facilities?
This is going to be opinion, and I'll preface it as that because I think that the danger is you leave something out. And so I would say, rather than saying, is there one that has a dearth, I'd say there are some locations where I don't think Wyoming's ever going to be Camp Perry. And Camp Perry is amazing, and it's amazing for what it is and what it does. But I think that when you look at where people are going, I'd take it back, and the folks from tourism can talk a little bit about this. Experiential vacations are the largest growing segment in the outdoor recreation tourism market. So what does that mean? Experiential vacation is someplace where people get to experience some kind of an adventure, where they're posting on Facebook and they're taking pictures and they're sharing those pictures because they're beautiful, and those types of experiences. What you see is people now, especially in Gen Z, kind of the newer generations, they value experiences more than things. And so when you can give them an experience in the place that they go, I think that makes a big difference. So how does that apply to shooting sports? Well, I think that Cameo, if you saw it, has sporting clays. And their sporting clays facility, is a gentleman who testified, talked about when you have a facility where people can go to a rugged location and they're seeing clays, pigeons, flying at them from crazy directions, and they're, throwing them off a mountain and up a mountain and across, things like that. Well, that makes a big difference. A lot of the popular long-range rifle competitions that I would say are up-and-coming competitions, they're not square range type activities. And so you see a lot of folks looking for terrain where they have, different wind coming in, where they're shooting in different directions, where they have, angles that are that you can't find on a square range. That tends, that I see as the direction that kind of the newer generation of shooters and shooting sports, a lot of them are interested in that. That by no means means that that's the only thing out there. But that's a direction. That's why 3-gun, USPSA, IDPA, these action-based shooting sports, I think that they're going to continue to increase in their popularity. So I would say you probably want to consider a facility, and that's the same thing with 3D archery, right? 3D archery is the same thing. It's experiential. People, they don't just want to shoot any, they'll still shoot like on a regular range. We have phenomenal Olympic archers, but where are they going for, for the total archery challenge? They're going to a ski resort. Why? Well, because they're hiking around the hills. The targets are in unique locations. It's an experience. And so that's, I think, something that Wyoming, I believe, can uniquely offer that a lot of places can't, but it requires that, kind of thinking outside the box. Because I think that, traditionally when we think about shooting ranges, we have thought about, the traditional square range. I think you actually have to still have the traditional square range. I think it's extremely important, but I think you have to be able to build out flexibility around that as well, that allows people to adventure in the shooting sports, which is where I think that the future of shooting sports lies.
Thank you. Very helpful. Questions for Mr. Cole? Anybody else? Thank you. Appreciate you hanging around. We might come back to you during the meeting. Others in the room wishing to testify on public comment. You're up front here, Mr. County Commissioner, and then you'll be next. All right. Please state your name and who you represent and what you'd like us to know.
My name is Paul Galovich. I'm County Commissioner from Hot Springs County. Hello, Aaron and Nephi. Been a long time. Been a recreational shooter and a hunter for all of my life, as I know both these gentlemen from way back. But I've provided you, or we've provided you. I'll go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Adam Estinson, Mayor of Thermopolis.
So we actually have 5 members of our committee that are present here today. I know that your RFP hasn't come out, but we're kind of proactive people. So I've actually supplied you with some thoughts and ideas and packets that you have there, just to kind of review some of the things that's gone through our minds as we've met as a committee and discussed the potential of the shooting complex. I would like to first begin though by thanking the chairman and the committee for your efforts. And I think this is just a wonderful opportunity for the state of Wyoming. And it just, we're excited about it. And I can't think of a better place to be located in Thermopolis, Wyoming. I'm a bit partial, but one of the things that we've discussed here that as you talk about the development of this program, is a cooperation between private companies, corporations, if they will, or private companies and the government, and in this case, the state coming forward with the initial funds for the project. But I do see it being kind of a self-sustaining activity as we move forward. In fact, I won't mention their name, but I've been in correspondence with an international company that's well known, that all of you would know if I mention their names. I'm waiting for them to give a letter of interest and intent of their presence on this shooting range. And as that comes forward, I'll be more than glad to share it with you. But that's how I kind of see this unfolding over the course of time, is a co-op, essentially beginning with government-sponsored resources, and those resources coming from private corporations as well. You've got a list in there, and I've just kind of gone over some different things. I actually platted out, some of what I would kind of see as a design layout that you can see on this particular diagram right here. And you'll notice that the acreage from the Whittington course and the Cameo course isn't reflective of their total acreage, but actually their operational acreage that they use. And so that's kind of just an overlay of different things. And I would see this facility being not just a shooting complex, but a learning / training center as well. And some of the different ideas that I have in bullet points there that we have is personal hand defense. And as I mention these things, the reason I do mention them is that there has been some expression by volunteers in our area, which is one of the things as I mentioned, I've been a county commissioner since January. That impresses me with our county is the level of volunteerism that we have in our county is deeply humbles me on many occasions. But so some of this has come from those that were willing to volunteer their time and their expertise in these areas. But personal hand defense, pistol training, personal protection, precision reloading, long range shooting techniques, a shoot house, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with what that is. That's for training for live fire room and building clearances, shotgun training, archery training, gun safety, 4-H shooting sports, and muzzleloader training. That's just to list a few of the training activities that could take place on this facility. And so I'll turn the time over to our mayor and for anything that he'd like to express, and then any questions that you may have in respect of your time. That's why you have the packet.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, before you begin, again, we want to focus not necessarily on a proposal from your community, but rather what information do we need as the task force as we go forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Task Force. I want to start out my counterpart, Mayor Gill. If you could bottle just a little bit of your enthusiasm into every bottle of Aqua Vista and Pepsi, the world will be a better place. So as our committee members that are here spoke to the question of the time frame of that pre-proposal for that initial response, if that's coming out in November, we felt that to propose maybe a 90-day response window, 30 days for the groups to kind of unpackage what you all come up as a guideline for that. And then that 60 days to put that initial proposal together. I believe it was Senator Cole that said, those proposals need to be tangible and attainable. And so that 60-day window for those communities to put together a package for you all to review, we felt would be a reasonable time frame for your consideration there. That is really all that I had there, other than just to mention that, we will be going into the holiday season, and we all know we lose about 10 working days when we go into that time frame. So that is what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, and right after the holidays, the barbarians all descend upon Cheyenne. And so we have that season that goes on right after the holiday season. So this committee most likely won't be meeting at that point in time. And so we need to get some work done up front. And if we do this in, say, late November or December, realistically for us to get back together and stuff is probably the 1st of April. So we need to make a little bit of hay between now and say the middle of January. And after that, we're pretty much out of pocket till around the 1st of April. So, we'll work with those timeframes, and that may be the time frame to get the next round of proposals back out. But I think that we can work within that, but I appreciate that input because that's very valuable for us to understand. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time as a community that's going to work on one of these under the pre-proposal that might fit into a time frame? Thank you.
Any parting comments from either of you?
Just that if you'd like, as this progresses, I'd be more than willing to go down and speak with legislators. I know a number of people in our community that would. And if you think that would be advantageous in the end, we sure offer our services to do so.
Mr. Chairman, just share an observation with you that I've made over the years is that you can tell a legislator a lot. You just can't tell them very much. And so we appreciate you talking to all of them that you can. So, but in it, and not to be facetious or funny, it is very important that you people reach out to all of your legislators and express your continued support as this process moves forward. So it's going to be vital, you know, at the end of the day, there's going to be somebody that's disappointed and somebody that's ecstatic, but we just keep them, you know, this is a process and it's for the state of Wyoming. And so I hope everybody stays engaged, but we really do need you talking to the legislators in your communities about how important this is for you and the state. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who's next? Right here. We'll take this testimony, then we'll watch that Whittington video real quick. Okay, so please introduce yourself and tell us what you want us to hear.
My name is Jason Crotto. I run Wyoming Tactical. I'm based locally, but I travel all over the United States and actually all over the world providing firearms training. One of the things that I've noticed listening to a lot of the conversation today is that people are approaching education and competition from two separate directions. And I would say to you that they're not. They are very much linked. And I will tell you that some of the facilities that I have dealt with and that I have taught at and competed at, the better the education facilities, the better the competition facilities, and the more unique challenges they provide for the competitors, vice versa. So if you look at this, you know, I would advise that you don't look at competition and education as two opposing curricula or criteria, but look at them as the same. Also consider that in Wyoming, we could have anywhere from 3 to 5 months, depending on Mother Nature, where this facility would not be a preferred place to run a competition. But specifically because of our weather patterns and our difficult environment, it would be a perfect training facility during those times. That would still generate revenue for the facility and generate that economic growth for the community. Consider a place like Gunsight. They are primarily education based, running somewhere between 40 and 50,000 students a year through. They're pretty tight on those numbers because they're very confidential about their students. But I have talked to their facility director recently, and he said that as far out as they are scheduled, they have every training hour filled and a waiting list. So by looking more at education, you create better circumstances for competition and more unique opportunities for those competitions. And again, vice versa, the more unique your competitions are able to be, the more unique training opportunities you can provide as well. And that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you. So in terms of the training during those 5 months, what would you suggest in terms of facility? What type of, as a trainer, what are you looking for when you pick a location to host training?
Well, it depends on what the training is, but particularly when you're talking about weather and you're introducing environmentals, you're bringing back students that have already been through preliminary training, and what they're looking to do is test those skills under pressure in more extreme environments.
Anything further? Thank you for being here. Who is next? Oh, we're going to go to the video. I'm sorry, short memory here. Yeah. All right. So let's watch that Whittington video real quick. You want to set the stage for us here?
Sure. I had a media event that I ran at the Whittington Center a few weeks ago, and while I was there, my committee local asked me to take some video footage and show the scale and a little bit of the Whittington Center, as it is the world-class facility that we're talking about in the country. As you move forward through the video here, you're going to see a multitude of refinements on how they present their facility. You start out with a drive down a driveway That's a 1/10 of a mile long, but every state's recognized with their state flag flying all the time. So you come up this driveway, so it automatically sets the stage that this is not just a local range. You come to the Welcome Center, which is a pro store, administrative offices, and a museum. And then there's a gate controlled entry. You have to sign your waivers and all that stuff to gain access to the facility. Then up the road, you drive down, and this is all industry support. People who have paid for, supported, sponsored ranges, sponsored cabins, whatever, they've have skin in the game on this facility. And that's about half a mile worth of signage. Trap facilities, there were no competitions going on at this time, but what the takeaway here is, and you'll see it on several of the other ranges, the clean nature, the tidy nature of a range that's been put in place since 1984 is well maintained. The weeds are kept down, the gravel's groomed, trash cans are emptied. There's a team that done nothing but maintenance. And this is a bench rest, to call it the Coors range. It's a mid-range bench course. It's 400 yards. And it is 100-yard wide, every 8 feet on center for a bench. That can hold a lot of people shooting at one time. And it's a fairly relatively new range. Everything they have at the Whittington Center's covered canopies if it's a seated position. But again, cleanliness. Look how nice, tidy, neat. The gravel's groomed, the weeds are cut, the grass is cut. Signage is key because it is a 33,000 square acre range. So when you come up to this, you'll see that every discipline has its own space. Again, the gentleman earlier talked about it, how it was all spread out, and they have the land to do that. Whittington Center got this piece of property because the land was donated to the NRA, an old Spanish land grant. Not that it was the best place in the country, but when land's free, makes it easy. Amenities, private cabins. So Raton's 6,000 people, the lodging ability is just not there. So they put on-site cabins. They have RV parks that are really nicely kept, stunning, full services, wash house. This is also right up the road from a competitive housing, which you'll see next. But from an RV standpoint, it's big, it's spacious, again, tidy, well kept, roads are groomed. And they get the same weather we do for all intensive purposes. So there's a crew out there doing nothing but making sure that the roads are taken care of. Competitive housing. There are 3 pods on this site. Each pod can hold 25 to 28 guests, depending on how they share rooms. Welcome Center, off to each wing, you're going to have a series of rooms, a single bed in each side, so 2 people in a room, and their own kitchen facility in their own pod. They can stay here for an extended period of time for extended competitions. I hold media events at this place. And there's the map of the Whittington Center. And it is strung out long because they use a natural backstop of a mountain to contain most of their sound and projectiles. So when you start looking at scale, this is a benchmark. And that's going to conclude the video, y'all. Well, they're on a 37 square mile Spanish land grant and 33,000 acres. Yeah, so 33,000 acres. 33,000. No, 37 square miles is the entire Spanish land grant. Yeah, square miles are completely different than acres. So 37 is the square acreage on a Spanish land grant and 33,000 acres. And it is spread out. It takes up a good chunk of that because you have walk trails, you have 5-stand and sporting clays that take up a non-traditional range space. They go into the trees in non-traditional areas. They go out onto the flats in non-traditional areas. They have 7 archery ranges, depending on the discipline that you're wanting to get in. They have 9 air gun ranges from field to bench rest. And those are not on traditional ranges like we saw with the bench rest or the trap houses. So every piece of that property is utilized mostly up by the mountain. The rest of it is walk trails, hike trails, points of interest. The Cimarron Trail goes right through there. They use a lot of it for nature and wildlife vegetation identification courses. There are other things happening on this range than shooting. lots of other things. The facility holds the people who work there, that work the roads and the maintenance on the facility. There's 21 homes on site of the folks that maintain the property. Now, in consideration of free room and board, they get a discount on their salary. But they live there and work there and they're there all the time. And that's not administrative staff, that's straight up maintenance folks.
Very enlightening. Any further questions? Thank you very much. Next up. Okay. Please introduce yourselves to the task force and tell us what you would like us to hear about how the task force can make the process work better.
Well, what I wanted to do is just welcome you. My name is Sherry Oler. I'm the mayor of Hudson, and I'm also a member of the Fremont County committee for the complex that we're pursuing. And I wanted to welcome you, obviously, and thank you for choosing Riverton as your location for the meeting. We had got together, we worked with the Wind River Visitor Council to deliver some packs to you. And the Visitor Council was very instrumental in getting that together. But more importantly, I wanted to point out that a lot of businesses donated to those packs. And we have a tremendous amount of support in Fremont County for our efforts for the shooting complex. And as a matter of fact, we went before the commissioners and they unanimously agreed and are in support of any of our efforts for the committee, which we thought was a really great thing. And I wanted to point out that we did, in those packs, we have a little bit of information about our committee and some of the things that we are focusing on that we believe are important items. But I don't want to bore you. You have the information. I don't want to bore you with the hit list of what we have included. And I believe we previously submitted that to you. So, and that's about it. I look forward to working with you guys in the future and submitting a pre-proposal.
Thank you. Many of the task force members did their best to help the tax base in Hudson at dinner last night. So hopefully there's some spinoff there for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gary Michaud. I'm the administrator of the Fremont County Association of Governments. This is an awesome project. Our committee is organized and mobilized, and we're looking forward to this proposal process. Thank you.
So you're interested, what we need to hear from you is where do you want the task force to go? What kind of information would be valuable as you formulate your proposal? What type of time frame? We heard somebody say 90 days would be ideal on the pre-proposal. That may actually stretch out till the 1st of April before we're back on it. I kind of hope that maybe during the session, the task force might be able to meet as well. We'll see what the schedule, awfully busy down there, but it seemed to me an opportunity might pop up where the task force could do at least one meeting while we're during the session. So, but from your perspective, what do you need and what's the timeframes and what makes sense?
So, an inventory hit list of what you guys are looking at would be very helpful. As a committee, we meet once a week, and we are, as I said, we included a hit list of things that we are looking at, and we're just trying to hone those abilities. We're reaching out to the legislatures. We're not letting any grass grow under our feet. So that's really a generality. It isn't a specific. Like I said, if you want me to go through that hit list, I certainly will.
We'll take a look. And thank you for the billboard outside of town. We saw the
Why,
welcome sign. That was very nice.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions for them? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Good, good. morning.
Morning, Chairman. Task Force members, thank you for having us here. My name is Island Richards, Sweetwater County Commissioner. I didn't bring a pitch or a proposal, but I have developed a couple comments as you've spoke this morning. First, I believe 90 days is an adequate time frame, depending on how in-depth that pre-proposal you ask for is. Depending on how big it is, that 90 days could go away pretty fast. To address Senator Kolb's comment on attainability in a pre-proposal, land acquisition will be a large part of this process. And I can see a problem arising, at least if we pursue private lands, where as soon as we identify something that would work for us, those prices will go up significantly and its availability will go down. So any guidance that you guys can develop on how we address that, because while we have land in mind, a lot of it's private. And again, as soon as we say that's what we want to do it for, and they know there's 10 million attached from your side, I can see those prices just skyrocketing. BLM land, of course, would be the affordable alternative, but as you know, the Rock Springs RMP draft proposal dropped, and I don't see anywhere in that draft proposal where there's any lands for disposal available going forward. So that would create some roadblocks. Finally, a large facet of this is the projected economic impact of whatever facility you guys decide to build. We would appreciate any resources you can provide as this goes forward and giving us an idea of what you think those impacts are. It'll be really hard for us. We looked into it right in the beginning, ordering a study, but without information from you, we have nothing to study for an economic impact. And as we go back to our communities and say, hey, we think this is a great idea, we're going to need to be able to show them that this is a positive economic, even if we have to invest it as a community, it's going to be worth it. And it's going to return to our community in the form of tourism and industry, et cetera. So those are the comments I had. Happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, just in terms of the land, early on in the pre-proposal level, for sure, we're not going to ask you to identify the location. So it doesn't have to be announced in advance that you're looking to buy land on the XYZ ranch, right? So we're not going to require that early on. Obviously at some point, if you're going to try to acquire private lands, my suggestion would be that you have a couple of different options if you can, so that you tell the landowners, we might use yours, we might use the other. And maybe you can negotiate a better deal with one of those property owners to acquire that land. So that'd be my suggestion on that front. And I would ask the folks maybe from the Business Council to talk about the process they use when they're trying to figure out potential economic impacts, not necessarily the data, but what's the process? How do you folks handle that on your side?
Yeah, Sharon, go ahead, Ron.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. I did look into that in the last few weeks. There's an element of knowing, what's the hit list in the proposal, and then we need that information: square footage, utilities, expenses, land, whatever. So you do kind of need a guide on what maybe perhaps a third-party consultant or someone could estimate the economic impact on that if you have the information to put in there. It's hard to do that without that. It's more of a kind of a guessing game, the best guess estimate. So.
Yes, something more.
Just to say, I think that when you look into that potential ROI on that, obviously a bunch of it's going to be speculative. The facility existing has no ROI. It's a building outside of construction, right? So I think that there's going to be a necessary piece of speculating at this type of facility it can attract this level of tourism, this level of competitions, this level of local use, drive this kind of revenue to get to that. And I think similar to even to, the very first pieces of starting a business plan, it's gonna be speculative and you're gonna have to use best guesses. So I guess as a committee, we need to make sure that we can at least set the bar for those estimates. But I think we're also, we need to understand that there isn't going to be a silver bullet gospel. Here's the ROI on that particular thing, but.
Good points.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
and I think, couple of things, when we look at these other ranges in other places, but we heard about Whittington this morning, we visited Cameo a few weeks ago. Those give us ideas about potential. But in one weekend, there's a $3 million impact on the local economy down there in Colorado when we were there. So the potential is pretty good, but again, a lot of it has to do based upon what we ultimately decide to build. If we build 5 different facilities in 5 different communities across the state, the return is going to be different than if we build one big facility in one place in the state. So your comment.
I was gonna say, I appreciate that. And that's the problem. It's kind of a chicken before the egg issue. We don't know exactly what you want. Do you want an indoor trap club with a indoor pistol range and a 2,000 meter thing? But we kind of are going to need to know what your estimates of how many people are going to be coming to these individual competitions. And we're only going to be able to develop that as you determine which shooting sports you want included in the phase outs. So just part of the discussion, and I appreciate your time.
Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a question for our own board. Don't we have the expertise here with the Wyoming Business Council to come up with these evaluations and to supply them to the applying entities so they can then go off and justify whatever they may be proposing? I just think we have unique expertise here.
We do have that expertise, but we also need to know what we're evaluating before we can evaluate it. So we've got a lot of decisions to make as a task force about what this project looks like, what it's going to entail, what it's not going to entail. So until we make some of those decisions, it's hard to estimate how much, use it's going to have, how many competitors are going to come in. If we have, a huge emphasis on archery and, trap shooting as opposed to some of the other disciplines, you're probably going to get a different level of participation in competitions and so forth. If you do, a winter training facility, as has been discussed, that's going to be different than if we primarily just shoot for trying to draw in competitors for big matches. So I think we do have that expertise, Senator, but we kind of got to know what we're evaluating to get that estimate. Senator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I by no means meant I have a prediction cap on my head. The point would be is once items are identified as a direction we want to go, at that point, we can help the entities that wish to propose a plan by having that economic impact at that time. I mean, it's obviously the only logical way to go. And I just think that the people we have here can supply that once we've identified what we wish to move forward with in a direction for a project development. That was my point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree. Mr. Co-Chairman.
So a couple things. I think with the pre-proposal, what we want to do is get people thinking of size and scope, not necessarily identifying just a parcel of land. Is it's going to take this big or a number of parcels of land to accomplish this. So you're out there kind of looking, right? Getting an idea. Always nice to have a backup plan. If the word gets out, you're looking at real estate and you got 3 different parcels, that tends to drive price down sometimes, versus single thing. And then ultimately if we're going to use any state money, it's still going to have to be based on appraisal on fair market value, regardless of what they think they want for it. And we have a constitutional provision. We just can't go buy real estate for it just because somebody wants that price. But I just thinking based on the conversation here, one of the things that I think that we need to have a little discussion with is we should afford all the local people submitting proposals opportunity to interface with some of our state agencies. And so, when I looked at one of the ones that was presented here, sometimes one of the things we want you to look at is look at state parks. Look at, other agency owned property. Could be Game and Fish's camp up here at Du Bois. It may be something up out of Whirling. There's some state park lands there. Work with those state parks, look at those state parcels out there as part of the package. I have had some discussions with the Office of State Lands and Investment. Those parcels would be potentially eligible for these projects. So, but we'll put that in there. So you're not just constrained at complete acquisition of private property. I know I've talked, and I'll turn it over to Director Glenn about, have they done any internal process within the existing state park infrastructure that might have some capacity of that? So those are the type of things that I see in the pre-proposal. Do you have any agency owned lands, Game and Fish, state parks, YDOT lands that could fit into this portfolio? Is that you're looking at acquisition, long-term leases? Those are the nature of some of the stuff. We need to make sure that you guys are out there looking for that, not just get fixated on a parcel. And just based on the discussion earlier of the ideal scenario, it may be multiple parcels. We were talking, you may have a central location, but it may be this component's 15 miles away over here, up on the edge of the national forest. And this part down here is down in the Badlands, and it's 5 miles from the central location. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this square concept of everything sitting on one parcel of land, but it has to be a close proximate nature. And so that's the things that we want to get into this pre-proposal to say it's probably going to take a minimum footprint size of this, but that footprint doesn't have to be one contiguous. It could be 3 miles over here, 2 miles over here, something of that nature. Does that help answer your question?
Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
Director Glenn, I think you're on the hot seat.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. Yes, we've actually looked at every one of our state parks, even some of our historic sites. I don't want to get ahead of the game because, we want these folks to propose and work with our state parks on issues and things like that. But we have looked at that and we've said, well, if we purchase this piece of private over here or this piece of Osley land, there's some potential to do those things. So we have taken a look at that at every one of our sites throughout the state.
Area, then you have a state park, and I've got a local committee working on this. I would be talking to those folks in those state parks, or Game and Fish Department has quite a few parcels scattered around. The Office of State Lands invests numerous institutional lands. Those are all on the table as part of the potential portfolio to look at opportunities. And that's all we're talking about now is opportunity. But again, we want to get that focus out there as part of this pre-proposal. Say, look at state lands, visit with your state agencies. What do they have available? How would that fit into your community's proposal for this facility? So I hope that helps.
We just want to be careful that, well, we want to give some general direction. We also want to leave things open enough that there can be some innovation and creativity coming out of the proposals. That if we say we want A, B, C, D, we're going to get A, B, C, D back for proposals. And so, we're going to give some broad parameters, but we really want to see, like I hadn't contemplated parcel A being 2 miles away from a base camp kind of facility, but that type of creativity, that how can you make this work in your local circumstance? And maybe you've got a potential that we are not even contemplating, but your committee comes back to us and says, would you consider this? Would you think about, this type of facility or this unique combination of locations. So we don't want to pin everybody in saying that we want A, B, and C, because maybe D, E, and F are better options. And so we want to give you some general guidance, parameters, get folks focused, but we also want to leave that room for creative endeavors. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would just strongly endorse what you said. I think there'll be some kind of a list of minimum requirements, but you've heard the testimony today with thinking creative, the unique advantages in Wyoming and standing apart and attracting national competitions. I think so. There could be a basic list of requirements, but communities can do the work to get creative too. And that could come with the land, or whatever, however that shapes out, public or private land, or private involvement in your community effort. So, I mean, it's kind of, whatever picture you want to paint and how creative you want to get.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, just to kind of tag team on that, had a conversation with Kate a little bit earlier, and I know it looks like we're muddling around in here. I mean, I'm sitting here and say, it's got to be like, we don't know what we're doing, but I'm uniquely and very cognizant of the fact that people support what they help create. And the maximum opportunity that we allow communities around the state of Wyoming to create this, the broader support that we're going to have. So I've never seen anybody yet, if I come and tell you, here's your plan, now go implement it, the first thing you do is you get pushback. And so we're a little bit slow and we look like we don't know what we're doing, but it's designed that way to give you every single opportunity to own this facility, to own the concept, to own the creation, the operation, and the maintenance. So that's the reason it looks a little bit slow, and why we keep coming and say, it's creativity. We're creating this creature. But we have to have a significant amount of support in your input to make this thing really work. And so that's why it looks like sometimes, we're not telling you, this is what you have to do. What we want to say is, this is an opportunity that we collectively can get done. And so it may look a little bit disorganized, but that's by design. So I hope that helps.
Mr. Chairman, it does. Appreciate the feedback. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and task force members.
So I liked what Brandon had said earlier, and I think we could still from their concept a little bit about this pre-proposal being almost like a readiness survey. That gives us some time to put at least some guardrails in that they can work with on these site selections, because we've already told them earlier today that topography could play a very important key. So if that's a high scoring thing, and then we tell them to go look for 10 different pieces of land, without really what those guardrails are, I think we're maybe sending them off spinning. But the readiness survey, as far as volunteer base, like Cameo has a great volunteer base, or housing, or whatever some of those things are for a readiness survey, I think is a very applicable use for a pre-proposal. There we go. I got her. While still not queuing up some of these land grabbing maneuvers that might send some of the real estate into a tailspin before you really know because we don't know what we want. So it's hard for you to know what we want, but I think that's a great use. And I think the Business Council has a template for that in their site selection that we would be remiss to try and reinvent.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think Kate was reading off my notes here, but no, I'm just kidding. I love the idea of keeping it open and keeping that creativity out there for these communities and municipalities to look at it and see what's available for them. I do think in the essence of time for these people putting in these initial RFPs, and our time as well as a committee, would be to give some sort of either suggestions or parameters. If we think there's a minimum on space, like land obviously is going to be a huge one. Is there a minimum that we think is there? And if the communities came back and said, we think we can actually go smaller, but really we're hoping that they go larger, have space to expand going forward. Some things are going to be, necessary, water, internet, roads, things like that. From my side of it, from the tourism side, I think even just giving some suggestions on when you're filling these things out to make sure you're working with not only the airports and highways, but talking to rental car companies or RVs or state parks, obviously with your RV campsites, private companies, restaurant capacities, hotels, like what do you have available? Is it a 1-star, 3-star, 5-star? How many room capacity do you have in your community? Those things I think that we can provide to them, maybe that not to guide them necessarily in this is exactly what we're looking for, but maybe give suggestions that'll make it a little bit clearer on some ideas and some roads that you might be able to take to give us a more comprehensive piece. So we're not evaluating and saying, I wish they would have checked this out in advance. That way, everyone's kind of on the same playing field to start off that says, this is where, there's a ton of brain power up here. This is where the committee would recommend taking a peek at these things, take it further where you can, but don't forget about some of these things. It's just the general guidelines. I think that there would be an opportunity for that just to make it a little bit easier on everyone submitting those.
Anyone else in the room? Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Justin Farley. I'm with the Advanced Casper. And I simply wanted to kind of condense this down from a request in this proposal as you guys put that together, because there's, absolutely, we want state of the art, we want world class. With that comes, and it was addressed a little bit, operating expense on that. So when you're identifying properties that resemble what we would like to have in Wyoming, if you could identify the expense of that operation, so that as communities put forward a proposal, that this 10 million isn't an invitation for us to go raise another 10 million and then have a $500,000 a year budget for operation, so that we all come in eyes wide open and understand what we're looking for. And that's all I want to add.
I think the short answer there is we want that to be part of the proposal. At least potentially, that maybe a community as part of their proposal says our county parks and roads will maintain your roadways on this facility. Okay, so I think there's some possibilities here, but we have not, as the co-chairman brought up earlier, we haven't really jumped into this governance structure. Is it going to be a joint powers thing? Is it going to be a game and fish thing, a state parks thing? Is it going to be a local government thing and the state owns the property, but the county or the city runs the place? None of that's been addressed yet. And so I understand that there's some hesitancy of communities to say, we're all on board on this. We just don't want to get stuck with a $10 million lifetime operating expense that we didn't anticipate. So those discussions will come, right? And a community is probably always open to withdraw their proposal at some point where they go, this isn't something that we're going to be able to accommodate long term. But those decisions haven't been made yet. So, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, Justin, I think, and we've had some of these discussions already with some of these facilities, we can get that data, finds out what's the annual O&M cost at Whittington with Cameo, with any of these. We looked at a number of these facilities last time. So we've got that. What we don't know is the rate of build out, but I think you're right. We can say, look, it's anticipated based on similar type facilities and other settings that the annual O&M budget is this. Is this something that the local governments anticipate that they would be willing to contribute? Is that what you're asking for? It's going to be pretty broad range and it will evolve over time as there's a potential build out. But is that what you're kind of looking for?
Thank you, Co-Chair. I think that the build out is one aspect of it, but the continual operation of that. And then so as part of my proposal, would it be, all right, the estimated cost of operating this facility would be $500,000. And these are simply numbers I'm pulling from the sky, right? $500,000. And then as part of my proposal for my community, would it be, all right, we've identified these sources as the funding mechanism to maintain operations so that we're not going back to the state or going back to the business council or trying to like, rah, we got that first 10 million bucks, but holy, now we're in a pinch.
So I think that is going to be part of the proposal. And so let's just run a couple scenarios that you have a municipal county proposal on the table and the county says, well, we'll do all the road maintenance, right? To and from the facility, and the city may have already parks and recreation people will maintain all the landscaping and all of that. That's part of the proposal that you would bring to the table and say, look, we're willing to contribute this on an annual basis. That the county will do all the road maintenance, the city will do all the grounds maintenance and stuff like that. I would anticipate that's something that would probably say, what does the entity propose to contribute towards the annual O&M of the facility? It may be using city personnel or county, but obviously you already have all that infrastructure and personnel in place. Is there room that then you could pick up this as part? But those are the type of things that I think each that'll go into the final proposal. Are you going to contribute and at what level and what that is? Is it grounds maintenance? And here's the grounds, and this is what an anticipated cost is. So does that help?
Yeah, and I think all I would say is if we could condense that down again to just the operational costs. I understand road maintenance and all of that, but the video, that magnificent facility with people that live on grounds that have people that are picking up around there. So yeah, we can put that off on city, we can put that off on whatever, but in part of that, if that MOU is like the dollars that we could expect so that we can reverse engineer that dollar to be like, all right, Parks and Rec, you can take this part, that's simply like the expense of operating this so that our proposal can be comprehensive on operating a business, which is what this is really going to be.
And I think the proposals can tell us what you're comfortable contributing. And so if the municipality says, we're willing to put forth this much towards the ongoing expense, then the message is that the rest of that has to be funded from some other way, right? Whether it's from private partnerships or from state funds or whatever. But in your proposal, you tell us these are the things we're going to try and sweeten the pot with. We'll sweeten the pot with the city's going to do this, the county is going to do this, private business in our community is going to be willing to do this. Then we have a sense of all the leftovers, right? Anything that's not covered in your proposal, obviously suggests that that's going to be something that the state has to absorb, and then as we discuss governance structure down the road, we will figure out whether this is going to be a state operation under one of these agencies or whether it's going to be and that may be something that your proposal suggests as well, that, hey, we would want to be as a partner in a joint powers board with the state of Wyoming, yada, yada, yada. You could even suggest in your proposal how you're going to cover what you would think would be the best way to go forward in terms of a governance structure. But we're trying to keep this as broad as possible, where if we tell you the state of Wyoming is going to fund, $1 million a year in O&M costs, then everybody's going to find a way to spend $1 million on O&M, right? So that's not what we're going to do. We're going to go the opposite way and say, what are you comfortable providing as your contribution to getting this project in your community? And then we'll have the understanding that everything not covered in your proposal is going to have to be funded by some other mechanism. Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Representative Newsom.
Good morning, committee. I'm Sandy Newsom, representing House District 24 in Cody. And I had a question. It seems like we're under the understanding that if you build it, they will come. And I'm wondering what the state support for marketing the state support for attracting these events, which it seems to me, even regionally, that we have a lot of competition to attract large competitive events, and maybe even to attract educational events. And so I'm wondering if the committee has any feeling, looking at Mr. Schoon, on where the state would fall in helping to market this, or are we on our own for our marketing? Obviously, we can use lodging tax funds and those sorts of things, but wondering where that fits.
Mr. Co-Chairman, you're green over there. I'm assuming you want to say
Well,
something.
there's a very specific reason why Wyoming tourism is represented on this board. Obviously, it's going to be a state, local, your local economic development tourism board, but I'll turn it over to our specific delegate, but there's a reason they're on this board or on this task force.
Great. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, Representative Newsom, thank you so much for the question. We definitely have a lot of channels that we use currently on promoting different events throughout the year. Obviously, some of the major attractions, Cheyenne Frontier Days. I mean, we work very closely with that organization to make sure that the messaging gets out there, as well as community-wide. Obviously, we work very closely with Park County, for instance. We work with Ryan Hauk at the Cody Chamber. But going forward, I think that there's a lot of opportunities, depending if we wanted to do marketing campaigns that would be on our channels that we currently own. That'd be social, Facebook, depending on where we go with those. Paid advertisements or putting like a whole ad campaign behind those. That would be something that we would have to look at the costs behind, and how much that we would want to invest for specific events. If there's certain ones, I don't know the ins and outs of what trade shows, and maybe Nephi would know what trade shows you'd go to try to attract some of these folks, or what the approach would be to try to entice them to come to Wyoming. But I definitely would be, our team would be willing to explore those and find out what the best options would be. I'm sure that there'd be some partnerships with State Parks, Game and Fish, and some of those folks as well on the messaging. But overall, I think it would be based mainly around the own channels, and then putting a paid effort behind it, depending on what that budget looks like.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, James. So most concerned about the ability to attract events. Once an event is attracted, once an event is scheduled, that is pretty straightforward. But the ability to compete with our friends to the south and to the further south in Colorado and New Mexico, how are we going to compete to get those shooting competitions to this particular venue?
My understanding is, and Nephi can probably fill in some of this, that some of these organizations have qualifying matches that occur every year. They have regional matches that occur every year. Some of them have national matches that move around. They're not locked into one community. They like to have it hosted in different places. Other events like Camp Perry was mentioned, and some of the NRA championships are always shot at those facilities. They're always at Whittington Center. They're always at Camp Perry. They're off the table. We're not going to track that. The archery event at Redding, California, apparently is always at Redding, California. So some of these we may create on our own. Otherwise, we may be, luring some of these rotating kinds of matches. Some of them may come to your community and say, we're staying. This is the greatest place in the world for us to have our match, and we're going to have our regional or national match at the Wyoming State Shooting Complex henceforth forever, for the foreseeable future. So I'm not sure the exact process of getting all those in, but I think advertising, SHOT Show, maybe in some of the major shooting magazines and those sorts of things, to say Wyoming introduces brand new shooting complex. Here are the features. Here's the build out plan. That's the hope, that we can market those. But Cameo's experience was exactly that. We built it, and guess what? They came. And so if we build the right kinds of facilities, it's going to be hard for some of these organizations to ignore that we exist. And that's the goal, that if we build the right kind of facility, these organizers or these matches will take notice. Senator Cole,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's one thing we have going for us that we're underestimating or haven't talked about. we're pro Second Amendment in the state of Wyoming. Well, I mean, we have a huge amount of weapons here in the state. I think it's known throughout the United States. What shot Cameo in the foot is the legislative body down there in Colorado, and we don't have that problem. So I think that's an incentive in itself. You're right. I mean, we're going to take other people's venues away from them because it's more competition. That's true, but I think we have a solid position to believe with high likelihood that we will be able to do that. Obviously, nobody would move this forward and thought we're going to fail. I certainly wouldn't go into something I thought it was going to fail. So I feel confident that we are going to have a successful venue once we successfully design one and pick one and place one, but we're not there yet. But I think it's a good question. I think Talent Tourism has a boatload of money, which we can expend towards advertising, and I look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was a budget footnote, by the way.
Okay. I spoke to a couple of NRL and PRS match leaders when we were first starting talking about this. And when you talk to a match director, you can recruit a match director and they'll bring the people. So we don't have to do huge advertising. And I think that Nephi will probably have a lot more information on this because he goes to a lot more, or Jason or any of the people in the audience. But you really have to hit the people that are going to bring the people. You don't have to blanket out 5,000 and hope they all sign up. You get the right person and that person brings them. So it's a much more focused ad campaign, much more focused recruiting. And we're going to start with 3. We're going to start with 5, and they're going to put on world-class events, and the word's going to spread because the next match director is in that group and they want to come and put their match on here. And I think there's some ground level. We have some of those people within the community that can lead those first events and be the hard chargers. I think we could count on Nephi and the NSSF to help get some matches here. And I think there's people here in the audience that are the right people to make sure that this is that we're successful at the first match, and then we go from there.
Director Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just back up what Cade was saying. I think that's dead on. The way I envision this is it's like a hotel and you want to come in and put on a conference. Our facility is the hotel. The organizers come in, set it up, make it happen. We just create the facility. When we were down in Colorado, they spent a lot of time saying, all we do is make sure it's clean and organized. And the organizers do everything else, including the marketing and all aspects of that. And I kind of envision that happening this way as well. Cade, you nailed it.
Nephi, did you want to chime in here?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I think Cade's exactly right. I think, first of all, when you say if you build it, they will come, that's exactly what happens. So the match directors, people who are passionate about this, people who are putting together these large events, you just have to impress them. You know, that's the person who you have to get, because it's not the competitor that decides that they're going to go. I mean, they're the secondary person to decide they're going to go to a match. The person who's developing the match, that's the person that you hook. Once that person sees that your facility is going to make their life easier in terms of they're the guys that are going to sell this match, not you. So if the match director sees that this facility is going to make his life easier, better, it's going to help him make a profit on the match or whatever else, that's what's going to attract that person to the facility, his ability to utilize that facility effectively. So with that, there are going to be minimum requirements that they're going to be looking for in a facility. And if you talk to them, they're going to tell you. So for example, an NRL Hunter match is going to have to be large enough. The NRL National Finals was actually held in Laramie about 3 weeks ago. I participated with a teammate there, and we did fairly well for 2 guys who aren't that great at shooting long range rifles. Cade, thank you very much. I used one of your optics. I just so everybody knows, I bought it. Cade did not give it to me. But that event had to have 20 different stages. So it had to have enough space for 20 different teams to be shooting at one time. So that's going to be kind of a limiting factor on NRL Hunter. There's going to have to be out to 1,000 yards in each field stage. So that's going to be a limiting factor there. Darren, if he's still in the audience, Mr. Devine can actually give you a really good rundown on what you have to host the national USPSA finals, because he's done that work, because he wants Casper to be able to host regional and national level USPSA events. So the Total Archery Challenge, Sean, who owns and runs Total Archery Challenge, is a good friend of mine. And so Sean will have certain requirements that they're going to have in terms of what they need to be able to put together a national level event. Once you understand that, so I think with your proposal, probably the thing you want to do is just have your proposal simply specify, if that's what you're trying to draw, to list those competitions, USPSA, regional or national, national level, sporting clays. That was an event where, for example, the Cameo complex knew that they wanted to have a sporting clays facility capable of hosting a national level event. And so those match directors, they already have those parameters and they know that. The second thing that you're going to want to know as well is along those lines, when you're trying to figure out, well, what does your facility have to have? How many people are going to come to a national event? Your facility has to be close enough to that many beds. And so whether you decide that you're going to build infrastructure, or perhaps the better thing for Wyoming, in my personal opinion, is where can you leverage existing hotel beds, restaurants, those types of things, you're going to put that in your proposal. Once you have when you have an idea of how many beds, how many restaurants, how much space, all these things you have within X number of miles of a given community, I think that really helps define, the process for everybody else that's involved. So as you're making a pitch, I know for me, I live in a given community. If I wanted to make a pitch right now, those are the types of things that I would be, wrapping my head around, is how many people can I get in one spot? How can I feed them? What kind of pictures are they going to take when they're there? And I think I just rambled on for 5 minutes, so I apologize.
Rambling's what you do best. Representative Newsom.
Thank you for those answers. I really appreciate it. And I don't want to keep you from lunch.
That's an impossibility. Anybody else have a short comment they want to make before we do break for lunch? Nobody wants that kind of pressure. Okay, come on out there. There's it. Welcome.
First off, I'd like to thank the task force for what you're doing and putting this together and everything. I'm Tom Outland. I'm from Moreland, and I'm representing pretty much the shooting complex that we have. We have about 12 different venues out at our range. And so I would be kind of opposed to seeing a state facility only have 2 or 3. Even if you had to start smaller, leave room to expand. That's kind of what we're trying to do at our range, is we set up a plan where we can expand. But I would also encourage you to try and keep in mind the youth. We need to get the youth back into the shooting sports. I guess I'd have to say, by the old saying, I'm a jack of all trades, but master of none. I volunteer a lot with like the Hunter Ed program. I've been a Hunter Ed instructor for roughly 25 years now. And I've been helping with what is called YHAC, or Youth Hunter Education Challenge. And I travel to, say, Thermopolis, and then I hosted one in Moreland this year. My hunter education, I do Moreland, and I just finished doing a class over in Basin. So I would encourage you to not overrule several communities jointly working on this complex, because say Moreland, if I have we also, my family and the shooting complex hosts a state championship black powder target rifle event. And we've been doing that for 10 years. This year I had shooters coming from Florida, Mississippi, Illinois, Washington State, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho. And it just continues been growing because we continue to fix the facility up and ask them, what would you like to see us do? So next year, we're going to have not only our black powder target rifles, but we're going to also have the black powder 22 cartridge rifles, an event the day before our other event. So I would just encourage you to keep in mind, maybe starting small and leave spaces available where you could add to the venues. Because our goal out at our range is to keep it a family venue that is safe, fun, and so far we've been attracting a lot of youth out there because we do have the 4-H comes out and they use our shotgun range and our rimfire range. I use the range for live fire for my hunter ed classes. And we also use the range for our youth hunter education classes. So, getting the kids back involved is, I think, a big goal. So that's all.
Thank you so much. And I think the committee absolutely agrees that the youth aspect is huge, and I think having a great facility where people are having a lot of fun, and then having also educational components there where young people are brought to the facility and they get to see this marvelous place and shoot at this marvelous place, it just builds and builds. And so thank you for all you do for the youth in your area. And I think many of your ideas are what we're after, but just scaling up, right? You're bringing in people from all over the place that come into Worland, Wyoming for a black powder match. And that's what we'd like to be able to do too, just bring in lots of people, but have that type of facility that would allow us to attract large numbers of people that these matches require. So thank you. I think your points are spot on.
Yeah, I know at this time that our match, it's a relatively small match. We have around 30 shooters, but we have at least 9 national champions that travel to it and 1 international champion that comes to it. And I'd have to say all of them, if I brought in a new shooter about a year ago, they all bent over backwards to help them. So they're all teachers too.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. All right. Josh, I think it's time that we go to lunch.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one. I sit here and I look out in the audience and I say, what's the irony of how many states would have a room full of people talking about, we want to bring hundreds and hundreds of people with guns into our communities. And I said, it's the irony is not lost on me that there's very few places left in this country where this conversation can even happen, and everybody's competing to bring people with guns into their communities. And so kudos to everybody that's here today, and continue to look forward as we adjourn for lunch and move into the discussion this afternoon.
Thank you. And so we will stand adjourned until 1:30, and we will return to take up our pre-proposal readiness survey, whatever we're going to call it. Well, that'll be the topic after lunch.